Tonight we enter the dust of southern Mesopotamia, where the oldest cities slept beneath wind, salt, and silence. In the 19th century, broken clay tablets began rising from the ground near ancient ruins in what is now Iraq. Archaeologists, museum curators, and scholars at institutions such as the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania slowly learned that these small pieces of baked earth were not decorative scraps. They were voices, they were records, they were temple accounts, royal claims, hymns, school exercises, legal disputes, and myths pressed into clay by a reed stylus. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows quieter around you, tell us where you're watching from and what the local time is when night has found you. You settle into the thought of those tablets, not as museum objects behind glass, but as things once held by human hands. A scribe sits in a low room, with dust on his ankles and wet clay beneath his fingers. Outside, sunlight burns white on mud brick walls. A donkey complains somewhere in the lane, because of course it does. Even in the dawn of civilization, someone's transport has an opinion. The air smells of river mud, barley, wool, smoke, and warm stone. The city is alive with small sounds, the scrape of baskets, the call of merchants, the soft slap of sandals on packed earth. Above it all, the temple rises like a mountain made by hands, a stepped shape reaching toward a sky that seems too large for comfort. You are in Sumer, or near enough to feel its breath. Records from ancient Mesopotamia confirm that writing emerged there more than 5,000 years ago, first for administration, then for stories, prayers, and memory. Scholars at Oxford and Yale often describe this change as one of humanity's great turning points, because a thought could now outlive the body that first carried it. A sheep counted in clay could remain counted. A king praised in signs could remain praised. A god invoked in a hymn could continue speaking long after the singer disappeared into dust. That is the official miracle, but there is another quieter miracle beneath it. The gods in Sumerian stories often behave like powers of order. They assign duties, build cities, establish temples, measure fields, and receive offerings. They are not distant clouds of perfect goodness. They are grand, difficult, hungry, emotional, and sometimes terribly tired. They quarrel, they desire, they make plans, and sometimes, rather awkwardly, their plans do not work. This is where the mystery begins to breathe. In many Sumerian and later Mesopotamian traditions, humans are created to serve the gods. They grind grain, dig canals, tend fields, bring offerings, and keep the divine houses full. It is a practical arrangement, almost suspiciously practical, like a heavenly labour contract written by someone who already hated paperwork. Humanity is useful, humanity is necessary, humanity is noisy, yet the tablets do not only show obedient workers beneath divine command, they show singers, mourners, tricksters, dreamers, lovers, kings, judges, thieves, widows, scribes, and children learning difficult signs by repetition. They show people remembering, arguing, imagining, bargaining, and asking why things are the way they are. That is the unsettling part. The gods may create humans for service, but the story suggests that something else comes with the clay, something restless, something inward, something that does not remain in its assigned corner. You can almost feel it in the first marks of writing. At first, a tablet records grain, oil, cattle, and labour. Then another tablet records a hymn, another preserves a myth, another stores a proverb sharp enough to sting across 5,000 years. A human hand begins by counting goods for a temple, and ends by preserving questions even a temple cannot answer. A small thing becomes vast. The clay remembers too well. Mainstream history tells you that Sumerian civilization flourished in city-states such as Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, and Eridu. Archaeological research connected with the University of Pennsylvania's excavations at Ur helped reveal royal tombs, artifacts, and the deep complexity of early urban life. These were not primitive villages stumbling accidentally into importance. They were organized worlds of irrigation, trade, hierarchy, craft, ritual, and astonishing imagination. But the fringe corners of old interpretation, those candlelit rooms of speculation, whisper a stranger possibility. Some writers have wondered whether the gods of Sumer were memories of beings older than civilization itself. Others imagine lost teachers, sky visitors, or forgotten survivors from a vanished age. Serious scholars do not accept those claims as proven history. Still, the persistence of the idea tells you something about the tablets themselves. They feel older than explanation. They feel as though they are not merely telling stories, but preserving shadows. And in those shadows lies the ability the gods cannot control. Not strength, because the gods are stronger. Not immortality, because humans die. Not kingship, because kings fall, their statues break, and their names vanish under sand. The ability is stranger and more dangerous than power. It is the human capacity to imagine beyond command. A god can demand offerings, but a human can wonder why. A king can order a monument, but a scribe can choose the words that survive. A flood can drown a city, but a story can carry one frightened memory across generations. A temple can direct worship, but a dream may arrive privately in the dark, where no priest stands guard. Perhaps this is why ancient literature so often feels uneasy around humanity. People are weak, brief, dependent, and foolish. Yet they are also unpredictable. They grieve longer than expected. They love what cannot last. They make jokes in the margins of serious systems. They name things. They remember insults. They invent explanations. They stare at the stars and refuse to be only clay. Some researchers continue to debate how much of Sumerian myth reflects actual social history, and how much belongs to ritual imagination. A cautious historian might say these texts reveal how early city dwellers understood labour, authority, death, and divine power. A poet might say they reveal something even more intimate. They reveal the moment humanity became aware of its own inner weather, that weather could not be taxed. It could not be stored in granaries. It could not be fully ruled from the temple. Your mind drifts deeper into the room of the scribe. The clay tablet is damp, soft, and waiting. His stylus presses a wedge into the surface, then another, then another. He is copying an older text, perhaps one already copied from something older still. He does not know you will one day think of him. He does not know that his marks will outlast empires, languages, kings, and the names of his neighbours. He only knows the clay must be written before it dries. Outside, heat gathers on the city walls. Inside, the small tablet receives its signs. A human thought becomes a thing, a fragile thing. Yes, but more durable than breath, more patient than memory alone. The gods may look down from their high places. They may hear the songs and smell the offerings. They may accept the smoke rising from the altars. Yet somewhere below, in the dim room of a school, a child repeats signs until the mind sharpens. Somewhere in a courtyard, an old woman tells a story differently from the official version. Somewhere beside the canal, a worker curses softly and imagines a better life. There it is. Not rebellion with swords, not thunder against heaven. Something slower, quieter, and harder to extinguish. The human mind begins to move beyond its assigned purpose. And once that movement begins, the gods can command the body, but not the dream inside it. Your mind drifts toward the plain between two great rivers, where morning arrives without gentleness. The land is wide, low, and exposed, a place of glaring light and stubborn water. In the distance, reeds tremble along the marshes, and their tips whisper under a wind that tastes faintly of salt. The soil is dark where the river has touched it, pale and cracked where the sun has won. There are no forests to hide in, no mountains to soften the horizon. only sky, mud, heat, and the long patience of human hands. Here, cities rise because people refuse to remain scattered. Mud bricks dry in rows beneath the open air. Workers carry baskets of clay on their backs. Children chase one another past walls still damp from new plaster. Oxen drag wooden ploughs through fields that exist only because canals have been cut from the river. Nothing about this world feels easy, and yet everything is becoming organised. The water must be guided, the grain must be measured, the labour must be counted, the gods must be honoured. Because in a place like this, the gods are not decorations, they are management. This Sumerian city is not simply a crowd of houses, it is a sacred machine. At its centre stands the temple, high above ordinary streets, raised on platforms that imitate a mountain in a land almost without hills. Around it gather storehouses, workshops, kitchens, courtyards, scribal rooms, and shrines heavy with incense. Priests move through dim chambers where oil lamps tremble against walls of packed earth. The smell is thick, part smoke, part wool, part beer, part offerings left too long in the heat. You feel the city working around you. A potter turns wet clay with steady fingers. A brewer stirs mash in a jar. A woman grinds grain, her shoulders moving with the rhythm of necessity. A fisherman returns from the marsh with nets that drip silver and weed. Somewhere, a foreman calls out numbers that someone else will press into clay. The whole place is alive with counting. Mainstream archaeology places southern Mesopotamia among the earliest regions of true urban development. Research discussed by historians at institutions such as the University of Chicago and Harvard has long emphasized that Sumerian cities were tied to irrigation, temple economies, specialized labor, and administrative writing. This is not a vague legend of civilization. It is visible in ruins, seals, tablets, tools, bricks, and the patient scars of ancient canals. Yet beneath that evidence lies a feeling no excavation report can fully hold. The cities seem too intentional, not impossible, not magical, but deliberate in a way that makes you pause. Out of mud and reed, human beings build an ordered world beneath a sky they cannot command. They shape canals against flood and drought. They store grain against hunger. They assign names to streets, gods to temples, duties to families, and boundaries to fields. They create a pattern, then live inside it, but every pattern casts a shadow. In the myths, the gods are often credited with establishing the first cities. Eridu, in particular, appears in tradition as a place of deep beginnings, a city associated with ancient sanctity and the watery wisdom of Enki, the Sumerian king list. That strange and fascinating composition places kingship first in cities before a great flood, and then again in cities after it. Scholars debate how to interpret this list, because it mixes memory, ideology, impossible reigns, and sacred imagination. A careful historian sees political theology, a dreamer hears an echo from a buried age. The numbers are wildly strange. Some early kings are given reigns of tens of thousands of years, which is the sort of accounting that makes even a patient accountant quietly close the tablet and stare at the wall. No serious historian treats those figures as normal biography. Still, the exaggeration matters. It suggests that the Sumerians imagined civilization stretching backward into a time almost too vast for ordinary memory. Long before recorded history, the story seems to say, order already existed. In a time that's no longer remembered, kingship had already descended. This is where the divine system begins to feel fragile. If the gods create order, why must order be renewed again and again? If cities are sacred, why do they fall? If kingship descends from heaven, why do kings die in mud, fever, ambition, and war? The city promises permanence, but its walls crack. The temple promises connection, but the god may depart. The canals promise life, but silt gathers, banks fail, and water chooses its own ancient mood. You walk in thought through a Sumerian street at dusk. The heat withdraws from the walls slowly, like a beast unwilling to leave. The smell of baked bread comes from a doorway. A dog noses through refuse near a drainage channel. A woman pours water into a jar and watches the level rise. A child looks up at the temple terrace, perhaps wondering whether the god truly lives there, behind curtains, in perfumed darkness. That wondering is important. The city teaches order, but it also teaches comparison. People see wealth and poverty close together. They see priests, merchants, labourers, captives, widows, kings, and scribes sharing the same dust under different rules. They learn that power has rooms, thresholds, ledgers, guards, and ceremonies. They also learn that power can be observed. Once power can be observed, it can be questioned. Perhaps not loud. Not yet. A fringe tidbit drifts through later traditions, where some readers imagine the early cities as planned enclaves of divine instruction, almost like stations built to train humanity. This idea remains speculative and far outside firm scholarship. Yet it grows from a real feature of the texts. The Sumerians did often describe civilization as something granted, arranged, and handed down. The arts of settled life did not merely happen. In their imagination, they were distributed from above, like tools from a locked storehouse. The open debate among scholars concerns how these divine gifts should be understood. Some Oxford archaeologists describe them as mythic ways of explaining social institutions. Some historians of religion see them as ritual statements about cosmic order. Others examine them as political claims, useful to temples and kings who wish to present hierarchy as ancient and sacred. No single reading empties the cup. The clay still holds more. You sense the unease inside the city's brilliance. The gods may establish civilization, but civilization gives humans new powers. A farmer tied to a field learns seasons with painful exactness. A merchant learns distance, risk, price, and persuasion. A scribe learns that the world can be reduced to signs and then expanded again through words. A judge learns that memory can be disputed. A singer learns that grief can be arranged into a hymn. The divine order produces human complexity. That may not have been the plan. The temple wants offerings and receives poetry. The palace wants obedience and produces ambition. The city wants labour and produces memory. Crowds gather beneath the walls, and each person carries an inner life no overseer can fully inspect. One man dreams of owning land. One woman hides a private anger behind polite ritual. One apprentice watches his teacher write and thinks, "Perhaps I could write better." Small thoughts gather. They become weather. In the gathering dark, the first stars appear over the plain. The temple's upper platform catches the last light, glowing briefly like a red coal above the city. Below, doorways close, lamps are lit, grain is sealed in jars. Somewhere, a tablet is placed on a shelf while still slightly damp, holding numbers that matter deeply to people long gone. The city sleeps uneasily because cities never truly sleep. Their walls hold whispering lives. Their gods receive smoke, but cannot inhale every thought rising beneath them. Their priests hear prayers, but not every doubt shaped in silence. Their kings command streets, fields, and armies, but not the secret comparison forming in the mind of someone watching from a doorway. The plain is quiet now, except for insects and distant water. The city seems obedient beneath its sacred tower. Yet inside that obedience, something grows more intricate than any divine plan. Human beings have gathered together, and once gathered, they begin to become unknowable. For a moment, it feels as though heaven itself has become tired. Not tired in the soft human way, with a blanket, a cup, and one dramatic sigh too many. Tired in the old divine way, with canals to dig, fields to maintain, food to produce, and cosmic duties that never seem to end. In Mesopotamian myth, the gods do not always float above existence in peaceful perfection. They work, they complain, they gather in councils, they look at labour and decide, rather suspiciously, that someone else might be made to do it. You stand at the edge of a canal before sunrise. The mud is cold around bare feet. Reeds bend in the dim light, and frogs click softly among the roots. A line of workers cuts into the earth with wooden tools, lifting wet soil into baskets, passing weight from hand to hand. The river is generous, but only when persuaded. Without canals, fields dry. With too much water, fields drown. Civilization becomes a negotiation with liquid chaos. The gods, in Sumerian and Akkadian tradition, understand labour as the foundation of order. In later Mesopotamian compositions, divine beings become burdened by work and call for a solution. Humans are made to carry the load. The idea is not hidden, it is almost blunt. Humanity exists so the gods may rest, receive offerings, and enjoy the arrangements of the world without constantly scraping mud from their own divine fingers. It is a humbling origin story, according to mainstream scholarship. Mesopotamian myths about human creation often connect people with service, agriculture, and temple ritual. Researchers associated with Yale and the University of Chicago have treated these stories as windows into ancient labour systems, where earthly hierarchy mirrors cosmic hierarchy. The myth says humans serve gods. The city says workers serve temples and palaces. The two ideas lean against each other like mud bricks drying in the same sun. You can feel how practical the story is. Humans are not first imagined as conquerors of nature or beloved children of a tender universe. They are useful creatures. They bring bread, beer, meat, incense, cloth, and praise. They maintain the houses of the gods, dress divine statues, sing hymns in the correct order, and keep the sacred economy breathing. A temple without offerings is not merely poor, it is dangerously quiet. The divine household must be fed. In this world, a god has a house. The statue is washed, clothed, perfumed, and placed before meals. Servants attend the sacred presence with extreme care. To modern ears, this may sound strange, almost theatrical, but the ritual was serious. The god's image stood as a meeting point between human community and invisible power. Neglecting that relationship could invite disaster, or at least the kind of administrative scolding nobody wants carved into a tablet. The scent of the temple is heavy in your imagination. Oil gleams in shallow bowls. Wool curtains hang still in the warm air. Bread sits on a table before a statue with wide, watchful eyes. Priests murmur softly. Their steps are measured, because sacred rooms make even confident people walk carefully. Everything suggests obedience, yet the story of human creation carries a quiet risk inside it. A being made to serve must understand instruction. A being that understands instruction can compare commands. A being that compares commands may begin to judge them, perhaps slowly, perhaps silently, but the capacity is there, hidden like a seed inside clay. That is the unsettling brilliance of the myth. The gods need workers, but they create listeners. They need hands, but receive minds. They need bodies for labour, but bodies come with hunger, memory, irritation, tenderness, and imagination. You cannot ask a creature to maintain a world and expect it never to notice the shape of that world. This is where the divine plan grows complicated. In one creation tradition, humanity is fashioned with clay and a divine element, sometimes connected with the blood or essence of a slain god in later Akkadian telling. Scholars debate how much this reflects older Sumerian ideas, but the theme is powerful. Human beings are low and high at once. They belong to mud, sweat, and mortality. They also carry some spark of the divine order they are made to serve. That combination is unstable. It is also deeply human. A quirky fringe idea sometimes appears in modern retellings. where the creation of humans as labourers is compared to an ancient memory of engineered servants. Some speculate about lost technology or non-human intervention, though historians find no solid evidence for such claims. The strange thing is not that these theories convince scholars. They do not. The strange thing is that the old myths leave room for such unease, because they describe humanity as designed, assigned, and then unexpectedly difficult. Even ancient gods discover management problems. The open scholarly debate remains more grounded, but no less interesting. Some researchers interpret these creation stories as theological explanations for why humans must work. Others view them as reflections of temple economies, where labour obligations were made sacred through myth. Still others ask whether the stories contain a subtle critique of hierarchy, since the gods themselves seem dependent on the very beings they command. That dependence matters. A god may be mighty, but in the story, the god still wants offerings. The temple may stand high, but it needs grain from low fields. The king may claim divine favour, but his power rests on farmers, builders, brewers, boatmen, shepherds, potters, and scribes. The whole sacred structure rises from ordinary effort, from tired knees and rough palms. You watch a woman kneel beside a grinding stone. Her hands move in a practiced rhythm, forward and back, forward and back. Grain becomes flour under pressure. Dust clings to her wrists. She may never enter the highest shrine. Her name may never be sung in a royal hymn. Yet without her labour, the offering table empties. Without countless hands like hers, the god's house grows silent. What is service, there? Is it submission, or is it hidden power? The myths seem to know the question without answering it. Humans are created beneath the gods, yes, but they become necessary to the gods. They are fragile, brief, and replaceable. Yet civilization cannot operate without them. The divine world depends on human repetition. Every morning, food is prepared. Every season, canals are cleared. Every festival, hymns rise again. Human mortality makes service constant, because each generation must be taught to continue what the last one began. That teaching becomes memory. Memory becomes tradition. Tradition becomes a force no single god can easily gather back into silence. Once humans learn the rituals, they also learn variation. Once they learn the hymns, they learn music. Once they learn the rules, they learn loopholes. And humanity has always had an embarrassing talent for loopholes. There is gentle sarcasm in the clay itself, if you listen closely. A servant who can think is never only a servant. In the low light of evening, workers return from the canal. Their shoulders ache. Their legs are streaked with mud. Someone laughs at a rude joke near the water jars. Someone counts rations and finds them smaller than hoped. Someone looks toward the temple and wonders why divine rest requires so much human exhaustion. The thought is dangerous, though no one speaks it loudly. It may pass like a moth through the mind, soft and almost invisible. It may vanish before becoming a sentence. Yet even an unspoken thought changes the chamber that holds it. The person who wonders is no longer exactly the person who merely obeyed. The gods want hands to lift the burden. They received beings who could ask what burdens mean, and in that quiet question, pressed neither into law nor shouted at heaven, the first trace of uncontrollable human power begins to shine. The scent of wet clay rises first, cool and mineral, like rain remembered by the earth. You find yourself near a riverbank at dawn, where the ground is soft underfoot and the water moves with a brown, patient shine. Reeds lean over the current. Small insects hover above the mud. A heron stands perfectly still, as if it has been carved there by a careful hand. The world feels unfinished, not empty, but waiting. Clay waits well. It accepts pressure. It records touch. It can be shaped, smoothed, cut, dried, broken, soaked, and shaped again. Few materials could better carry the ancient imagination of human origins. In Sumerian thought, clay is not just dirt beneath the heel. It is the substance of walls, bowls, tablets, seals, figurines, ovens, and cities. It is the common matter from which civilization lifts itself into form. So when stories speak of humans made from clay, the image is not decorative. It is intimate. It is local. It comes from hands that know the weight of mud and the patience required to make it useful. A potter sits near a courtyard wall, turning a lump slowly between damp palms. The wheel hums with a low, circular sound. His fingers press inward, then rise. A vessel begins where shapelessness had been. It is almost too simple. A hollow is made, and because of that hollow, the vessel can hold water, oil, grain, or beer. Usefulness begins with emptiness. Perhaps humans, too, begin with a hollow. The ancient texts do not always agree in detail, and that matters. Creation traditions shift from city to city, language to language, and century to century. Some speak of divine birth, some describe shaping, some place a goddess at the centre of the making, some involve wisdom, blood, clay, or a decree spoken among gods. But across these variations, one image keeps returning like a slow wave. Humanity is formed from the material of the earth, then given something more than earth should possess. Mainstream historians note that Mesopotamian creation accounts survive in several versions, preserved through schools, temple traditions, and later libraries. Scholars at Stanford and Oxford have often emphasized that these myths should not be flattened into one single doctrine. They are layered traditions, each shaped by ritual, politics, local theology, and scribal learning. Yet the persistence of clay reveals a shared intuition. The human body belongs to the ground. That fact is both comforting and severe. You can touch clay. You can smell it. You can watch it stain the lines of a worker's palm. It is ordinary enough for a child to dig from a riverbank. Yet once fired, clay can outlast wood, cloth, leather, and the delicate bodies of kings. A clay tablet can survive the burning of the building that tried to destroy it. Fire, the enemy of many things, becomes its protector. There is a quiet joke there. The fragile material remembers best. A fringe tidbit drifts from the edges of modern interpretation, where some have imagined clay creation as a coded memory of ancient experimentation. They speak of shaping bodies, mixing essences, or designing workers in a forgotten age. Serious archaeology does not support such claims as literal history, but the fascination remains understandable. The myths do not describe humanity as simply appearing. They describe humanity as made, planned, adjusted, and placed into a role. That image invites unease, yet the older wonder is stranger without modern speculation. A thing made from clay should be passive. It should receive form and remain what the maker intended. A bowl does not argue with the potter. A brick does not ask why it must hold weight. A tablet does not choose the signs pressed into it. But humans in the stories do not stay like bowls, bricks, or tablets. They listen. They learn the names of gods. They memorize rituals. They mourn the dead. They pass stories into the ears of children. They begin as formed matter, then become interpreters of the world that formed them. The hand that shapes clay may expect obedience, but the shaped creature begins shaping meaning in return. This is a dangerous exchange. You imagine a newly formed human opening the eyes of thought for the first time. Not a dramatic awakening, not thunder, not a shining beam from the sky. Something quieter, the smell of wet earth, the ache of hunger, the warmth of another body nearby, the sound of water against reeds, the first fear, the first need, the first recognition that the world is outside, and yet somehow also inside. The clay has begun to listen. The open scholarly debate turns on how ancient audiences understood this moment of animation. Some historians of religion see it as a statement about ritual dependency, where life itself is granted by divine authority. Others argue that these creation motifs reflect the lived experience of craftsmen and birth workers, especially the knowledge that bodies are formed through process, pressure, fluid, and time. A few literary scholars focus on the tension between design and unpredictability, because the created being never remains only a tool. That tension glows inside the myth. A creator may form the body, but consciousness is less obedient. It moves through memory, desire, pain, and curiosity. It hears a command, then hears its own response forming in silence. It learns not only what is said, but what is withheld. It begins to measure distance between itself and the divine. The gods can mould clay. Can they mould interpretation? That is the more troubling question, and the tablets seem to circle it softly. Humans are given roles, but they create meanings inside those roles. A worker carrying bricks may think of home. A woman preparing offerings may remember her mother's voice. A child learning signs may discover that the same hand used for temple records can write a proverb about hunger, laziness, cleverness, or love. Each assigned act becomes a doorway to something unassigned. This is why clay matters so deeply. It is not only the substance of the body, it is also the substance of writing. The same earth that forms a human in myth forms the tablet that preserves human thought. Body and record share a material ancestry. Both are shaped by pressure. Both bear marks. Both can be damaged. Both can survive in unexpected ways. In the shade of a wall, a young apprentice presses signs into a practice tablet. His first lines are poor, the wedges lean badly, the spacing is a little tragic, but let us be kind, because everyone begins somewhere. His teacher corrects him with a dry patience known to instructors in every century. Again, the apprentice presses. Again, the clay receives. Yet something else is happening. The boy is not merely copying signs. He is learning that thought can leave the body. He is learning that memory can become object. He is learning, perhaps without knowing it, that clay does not only receive divine plans, it can carry human ones. A lump of earth becomes a mind's shadow. Outside, the city warms, bricks dry in the sun. Pots stand stacked beside a kiln. Tablets harden on shelves. A figurine of a goddess rests near a household shrine. Its face simplified but watchful. Everywhere, clay holds the shape of what hands have asked from it. Wall, jar, idol, tablet, toy, seal, oven, grave offering, and city. The material is humble but never mute. You feel the softness of it in your own imagined palm. Press too hard and the form collapses. Press too lightly and nothing changes. Shaping requires care. And perhaps that is another hidden lesson in the old stories. Even gods must take a risk when they make something capable of receiving form. The receptive thing may one day receive more than intended. It may receive memory. It may receive sorrow. It may receive a question and keep it alive. So the clay body stands in the mythic dawn, not yet king, not yet scribe, not yet rebel, not yet sage. It is only human, which is already complicated enough. It is made of earth, yet it will dream of heaven. It is made for work, yet it will sing while working. It is made to serve, yet it will wonder what service reveals about the one being served. The river slides past in brown silence. The potter lifts a finished vessel and sets it aside. The apprentice smooths his tablet and begins again. The city, made from clay, fills with beings imagined from clay, writing on clay about gods who never fully master what clay has learned to hold. And in that soft, damp beginning, the oldest secret stirs. The formed thing has become aware. In your ears, the river becomes quieter, as though it is hiding a name. You are near the deep water of Eridu, that ancient place later remembered as a city of beginnings. The land around it is low and shimmering, patched with reed beds, pools, and narrow strips of cultivated earth. Birds lift from the marsh at the first touch of light. Their wings beat softly over water dark enough to seem bottomless. Beneath the surface, fish move like thoughts that prefer not to be caught. Here, wisdom belongs to depth. Enki, lord of sweet waters, craft, intelligence, and subtle rescue. Rises in the imagination like a god who understands locked doors. He does not always break them. He studies the hinges. He listens to the silence around the latch. Then, with that calm confidence known to clever people everywhere, he finds the one rule that everyone forgot to guard. This is not rebellion in a loud form. It is wisdom with wet footprints. In Sumerian tradition, Enki is associated with the waters beneath the earth, the hidden freshwater source that feeds wells, marshes, canals, and life itself. Mainstream scholars at institutions such as Yale and Oxford often describe him as a god of wisdom, creation, fertility, magic, and technical skill. He is not merely intelligent in the abstract. His knowledge is practical. It builds, it heals, it tricks, it arranges. The atmosphere around him is different from the high command of certain other gods. Enki is not simply a thunderous ruler issuing decrees from a bright distance. He is nearer to the workshop, the canal bank, the birthing room, the ritual basin, and the clever solution found when disaster has already begun leaning through the doorway. You stand beside a reed hut near the marsh. The morning air smells of water plants, fish, smoke, and damp rope. A boat scrapes softly against the bank. Someone has left a clay jar tilted near the threshold, catching drops from a woven mat. Everything here feels improvised and ancient at once, as if survival itself has learned to braid reeds. Enki belongs in such a world. He is often the divine figure who knows how systems function from within. If the gods create rules, Enki understands their seams. If destiny is distributed, Enki knows the storeroom. If humans face destruction, Enki may find a way to warn without openly disobeying, which is exactly the sort of behaviour that makes officials nervous in every age. A quirky fringe idea follows him like marsh mist. Some modern interpreters imagine Enki as a keeper of forbidden science, a figure who gave humanity advanced knowledge too early. That speculation stretches far beyond evidence, yet it feeds on a genuine feature of the myths. Enki is the god who brings techniques, arts, wisdom, and survival strategies close to human beings. He makes civilization feel less like a cage and more like a toolkit, and tools are dangerous. A tool begins as service, then becomes possibility. A plough serves the field, but it also expands the village. A boat serves trade, but it also carries rumour. A stylus serves accounting, but it also preserves complaint. A song serves ritual, but it also shelters grief. The divine gift never stays neatly inside its first purpose. Enki's gifts work that way. In stories of the divine powers that organize civilization, sacred qualities pass among gods and cities. Kingship, priesthood, craft, wisdom, music, sex, war, justice. And writing can be imagined as powers held, transferred, guarded, or stolen. Scholars debate the meaning of these lists and tales. Some see them as mythic inventories of culture. Others view them as political claims about why one city possessed prestige. Literary researchers focus on their nervous humour, because divine order often moves through negotiation, intoxication, mistake, and boldness. That's a wonderfully human detail. Sacred authority has paperwork, but also loopholes. The tale of Inanna and Enki, in which divine powers are taken from Eridu toward Uruk, reveals an ancient fascination with cultural transfer. The story is lively, clever, and oddly domestic in places. It has feasting, persuasion, regret, pursuit, and the remarkable suggestion that civilization itself can be moved like treasure in a boat. The powers that shape society are not frozen. They travel. They can be possessed, lost, claimed, and reinterpreted. You can almost hear the boat moving through the water. Reeds brush its sides. The cargo is invisible but heavy. Behind it, messengers hurry. Ahead, a city waits to become more than it was. Somewhere in the divine confusion, human culture grows richer. Not because order remains sealed, But because order leaks, Enki is always near the leak. He does not simply give humans information. He models a way of thinking. Look closely, listen carefully, respect power, but notice its blind spots. Understand the rule, then understand the reason beneath the rule. When danger arrives dressed as inevitability, ask whether inevitability has been properly inspected. That habit is contagious. A human being taught only obedience becomes predictable. A human being touched by cunning becomes something else. They can adapt. They can hide meaning. They can answer a command in one way while privately preparing another. They can survive by interpretation, which is perhaps the oldest form of intelligence in a dangerous world. The gods can command the canal to be dug. They cannot fully control what the digger learns from water. A canal teaches more than labour. It teaches flow, pressure, timing, weakness, repair, and consequence. Block one channel and another swells. Neglect one bank and the field changes. Human beings who work with systems begin to understand systems. They see that authority is also a structure with channels, gates, and points of failure. No wonder wisdom is dangerous. In the dim coolness of a temple room, a priest pours water into a basin. The surface trembles, catching lamplight. Words are spoken softly over it, not as decoration, but as a technology of sacred attention, ritual, medicine, purification, and magic lie close together in Mesopotamian thought. Enki's realm includes the hidden knowledge of how words, waters, substances, and gestures might alter the world. Modern scholarship continues to debate how to translate that ancient category of knowledge. Some call it magic, some ritual expertise, some religious technology, some learned tradition. A cautious professor at the University of Chicago might remind you that ancient people did not divide science, religion, and medicine the way modern minds often do. Their world was woven, a spoken formula, a plant, a gesture, and a god could belong to one act of healing. That woven world gives humans room to act. They are not passive beneath fate. They perform rites, they recite words, they mix ingredients, they observe omens, they apply skill, they ask a god for help, then do something with their own hands. This partnership is never equal, but it is not empty either. Human agency slips into the sacred process like water through reed matting. Enki's dangerous gift may be exactly that agency, not freedom in the modern sense, not open rebellion, not a banner raised against heaven, rather a quiet capacity to participate in shaping outcomes. Humans learn the rituals, then become keepers of them. They learn craft, then make beauty no command required. They learn language, then say what no decree anticipated. Your mind settles beside the marsh again. Evening gathers purple over the pools. The smell of wet reeds deepens. Frogs begin their soft clicking chorus, apparently convinced the universe needed percussion. A boatman ties his craft to a post and looks toward the temple mound in the fading light. He may know little of divine counsels, but he knows currents. He knows where the mud is treacherous. He knows which stars guide him home. That knowledge is humble. It is also power. Enki stands in the old stories as the patron of such power, the wisdom of depth, craft, evasion, and living intelligence. Through him, humans receive more than tasks. They receive methods. They receive the arts of making, reading, healing, measuring, and surviving. Every method opens another question. Every skill makes the servant less simple. The gods may have wished for reliable hands. Enki let those hands learn, and once hands learn, they begin to alter the world that claimed to have finished creating them. A low murmur rises from the city before sunrise, and it does not ask permission. At first it is only the sound of waking bodies. A door bar lifts from its sockets. A grinding stone begins its steady song. Goats complain in courtyards with the confidence of small tyrants. Water splashes into jars. Somewhere, a baby cries, then stops, then remembers the argument and begins again. Smoke slides upward from cooking fires, and the smell of barley cakes thickens in the cool air. The city is becoming a voice. You stand in a narrow street where mud brick walls hold the night's fading chill. Above you, the sky pales from black to blue. The temple terrace catches the earliest light, but below it ordinary life has already begun its unruly chorus. A potter calls for more clay, a brewer laughs too loudly, a trader curses a sleepy donkey with real artistic commitment. Children run past with dusty knees, carrying nothing useful and somehow making everyone busier. This is not silence serving heaven. This is humanity multiplying. In Mesopotamian myth, the noise of humans becomes more than an inconvenience. It becomes a cosmic problem. Later Akkadian stories, especially flood traditions, describe humanity's clamour disturbing the gods, preventing divine rest, and provoking a terrible decision. The old theme is startling because it imagines human life itself as excessive, not merely sinful, not merely disobedient, too numerous, too loud, too impossible to ignore. A mainstream historical fact rests behind this mythic anxiety. Ancient Mesopotamian cities grew through irrigation agriculture, administrative coordination, and dense labour systems. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago have connected urban growth with the pressures of food supply, disease, conflict, and social hierarchy. A crowded city was a triumph, but also a burden. More people meant more grain, more disputes, more waste, more demands, more songs, more babies, more everything. Even success had a sound. You can imagine the gods hearing it from above. The divine houses are perfumed and orderly, but the streets below do not remain ceremonial. They clatter, they bargain, they cough, they celebrate. They quarrel over rations, inheritance, marriage, land boundaries, damaged goods, and the timeless human tragedy of someone borrowing a tool and returning it in worse condition. Order produces noise. That is the irony humming beneath the tablets. The gods desire offerings, and offerings require people. People require fields. Fields require canals. Canals require workers. Workers require food, households, births, markets, and language. Soon the tidy divine plan is surrounded by the roar of the system needed to maintain it. The servants are not a small household staff. They are cities, fields, ports, workshops, and restless generations. No wonder heaven loses sleep. The strange detail is that human noise in these myths is not only physical sound. It suggests growth beyond measure. Noise is population, pressure, appetite, invention, complaint, music, sex, grief, argument, law, and rumour. Noise is the social life of beings who do not remain neatly arranged on a divine shelf. It is the echo of clay becoming too animated. A fringe tidbit appears in the way some modern readers treat the flood stories as distorted memories of real environmental disasters, perhaps great river floods magnified into cosmic destruction. That possibility is not absurd in broad terms, since southern Mesopotamia was shaped by shifting waters and dangerous inundations. The fringe begins when speculation turns every myth into a literal lost global event or secret archive of vanished science. Still, myths often preserve emotional truth even when their scale becomes immense. The waters may be historical. The terror is certainly human. Scholars continue to debate how the flood traditions developed across Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and later cultures. Some see them as theological reflections on divine justice and human vulnerability. Others study them as literary responses to urban crowding, ecological stress, and royal ideology. A few focus on the uncomfortable portrayal of the gods themselves, because the divine council can seem irritated, divided, impulsive, and dependent on the very humanity it threatens. That is a remarkable tension. The gods are disturbed by human noise, But when humanity is nearly destroyed, the gods suffer hunger for offerings. The world becomes quiet, perhaps beautifully quiet for one awful moment, and then the silence reveals its cost. A temple without human hands is not serene. It is abandoned. A divine table without bread is not pure. It is empty. The gods cannot live with human excess. They cannot live without it either. You move through the city at midday, when the sound has ripened into heat. Copper workers hammer near an open yard. Their blows strike in ringing patterns, bright and metallic. Sellers cry out in the market. A woman bargains with calm ferocity over a measure of dates. A scribe sits beneath a shade cloth, recording a dispute while trying not to look personally offended by the stupidity of everyone involved. The air smells of sweat, fish, crushed herbs, dung fuel, and hot dust. It is not romantic in the clean, polished way of museum displays. It is alive, it is crowded, it presses against the senses. The sacred tower may dominate the skyline, but the city's true power is in its accumulation of small human acts. Each act makes sound, a lullaby at night, a funeral lament, a wedding song, a legal argument, a joke told too close to a priest, a complaint whispered over thin beer, a child repeating signs in a schoolroom until the syllables blur. These noises do not merely disturb, they create the human world. Perhaps that is why the gods fear them. A command descends once. A rumour travels sideways forever. A law is written formally. A song carries feeling where law cannot reach. A royal order can demand silence in a courtyard, but it cannot prevent a story from growing in 10 houses by evening. Noise is communication without full control, and communication is the beginning of collective memory. This is the ability no divine council can easily govern. Not speech alone, but shared imagination. One person wanders. 2 people compare. 10 people remember the same injustice differently. A city becomes a mind made of many minds, and that mind does not sleep when the palace sleeps. It dreams in markets, kitchens, docks, taverns, weaving rooms and burial places. It hums under official ritual like insects in the reeds. In the flood traditions, the gods attempt to reduce the noise. Plague, famine, drought, and finally water appear as ways to quiet humanity. Yet each attempt reveals the same problem. Human life adapts, suffers, prose, bargains, and remembers. Even catastrophe becomes narrative. Even divine violence becomes a story told by survivors, copied by scribes, and carried into other languages. The noise returns as memory, as almost funny in a dark and gentle way. You try to silence humans, and they write down the story of how you tried. Honestly, very uncooperative behaviour from the clay department. As evening settles, the city's sound softens but does not vanish. Lambs bleat near a gate, a door creaks, a flute plays somewhere beyond the wall, thin and wandering. The last light lies across the canal like dull bronze. Mosquitoes gather with ancient confidence, proving that not every old thing deserves reverence. You feel the hush that comes when a city grows tired. Yet even in sleep, minds continue moving. Dreams rise behind closed eyes. Worries coil beneath blankets. Lovers whisper. Old people remember the dead. Infants breathe with the tiny authority of the future. The city rests, but it has not become controllable. The gods wanted service, but service gathered into society. Society gathered into language. Language gathered into memory. Memory gathered into a noise that could survive command, flood, hunger, and fear. So the troubling sound beneath the myth is not merely human loudness. It is the murmur of countless inner worlds touching one another, and once those worlds begin to speak, even heaven cannot easily return to silence. In the quiet hours, and when the lamps burn low, the temple loses its certainty. You lie beneath a roof of reeds and packed clay, while the night presses softly against the city walls. The air is cooler now, scented with ash, wool, old straw, and the faint bitterness of oil smoke. Somewhere nearby, a sleeping animal shifts its weight. Farther away, a watchman coughs beside a gate, then returns to his thoughts. Above everything, the stars seem close enough to listen. This is the hour of dreams. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreams were not treated as idle pictures drifting through a tired mind. They could be warnings, divine messages, omens, temptations, memories, or strange crossings between worlds. A king might dream before a battle. A priest might interpret a troubling vision. A sufferer might sleep in a sacred place, hoping for guidance. The night was not empty. It was crowded with meaning, yet dreams arrive privately. No god controls their gate. That is what makes them dangerous to any system built on public ritual and visible authority. A temple can schedule offerings. A palace can summon witnesses. A scribe can record a contract. But a dream comes without a herald, slipping through the sealed room of the body. It may visit a king or a slave, a priestess or a brewer, a child or a widow sleeping beside a cooling hearth. Mainstream scholarship confirms that dream interpretation was a serious tradition in Mesopotamia. Researchers at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied omen texts in which dreams are classified, interpreted, and linked with possible outcomes. These lists reveal an ancient effort to make the private night legible. If a man dreams of water, an animal, a dead relative, a falling wall, or a shining figure, the sign may be sorted into meaning. That sorting is impressive. It is also a little desperate. You can feel the anxiety behind it. If dreams matter, then they must be read. If they can be read, then perhaps they can be managed. If they can be managed, then the secret chamber of sleep might be brought into the same order as taxes, rations, borders, and temple rites. The mind at night becomes another field to be irrigated, another canal to be measured. But dreams dislike fences. They change shape while you watch them. A god speaks, but the words are blurred. A dead mother appears, yet her face belongs to someone else. A river flows uphill. A city gate opens into a childhood courtyard. A lion carries a basket of figs, which is probably a sign, or perhaps just the mind being dramatic because it had dates too close to bedtime. The old interpreters knew this difficulty. They created patterns, but the dream itself remained slippery. It could be analysed only after it had already escaped. The vision belonged first to the dreamer. Everyone else arrived late. This is a quiet revolution of the inner world. In the waking city where a hierarchy is visible. The temple stands above the houses. The king appears in ceremony. Priests know sacred words. Scribes know difficult signs. Labourers know the ache of grain and mud. But in sleep, images cross boundaries. A shepherd may see a god. A servant may receive a warning. A young woman may dream of a future no elder has approved. A defeated king may meet terror no praise singer can soften. Dreams level the darkness. They do not make everyone equal in public life. Of course, ancient society remains structured, ranked, and often harsh. But dreams create a space where authority cannot fully prevent encounter. A divine message may choose an inconvenient listener. A truth may arrive without going through the correct office. That possibility is unsettling. It gives the human mind a hidden door. A fringe tidbit clings to dream lore with special persistence. Some modern readers imagine that ancient dream accounts preserve traces of contact with other dimensions, lost teachers, or beings beyond ordinary human perception. Serious historians approach such claims cautiously, and usually with both eyebrows awake. Yet the fascination makes sense. Mesopotamian texts themselves treat dreams as borderlands. They are not merely psychological events. They are places of visitation. That borderland feeling is ancient. Scholars still debate how ancient dream experiences should be understood. Some interpret them as religious communications framed by culture. Others study them as psychological and literary devices, useful for legitimizing kings, explaining decisions, or dramatizing divine will. A few focus on the social function of interpretation, because the person who explains a dream gains power over the person who dreamed it. That last point matters deeply. Interpretation is never neutral. The dreamer owns the experience, but the interpreter may control its public meaning. A priest can turn confusion into instruction. A court specialist can make a dream support a policy. A family elder can warn that a vision demands obedience. In that way, institutions try to reclaim the night. But the dreamer remembers what was felt. A sign can be explained. Yet the feeling remains untamed. The fear in the chest. The sweetness of a vanished face. The strangeness of standing inside a city that does not exist. The shock of hearing a voice without seeing a mouth. These things resist ID translation. A tablet may record the omen, but not the full weight of waking before dawn with tears drying at the temples. You walk through the sleeping city in thought. Doorways are sealed. Courtyards are dark. The great temple looms like a shape cut from the stars. Inside its rooms, divine statues sit in scented stillness. Outside, human bodies lie curled under blankets, each one containing a theatre no ruler can inspect. There! The gods may appear, but humans may also rearrange them. In dreams, a god can be frightened, beautiful, angry, silent, or strangely human. A city may collapse and rise again in a breath. A dead child may speak. A future king may be crowned by impossible hands. The dream world borrows sacred images, then bends them according to grief, desire, and memory. Even divine symbols become material for human imagination. That is the forbidden softness at the heart of sleep. No temple can command what image must appear at the moment the mind drifts away. No palace decree can forbid a dream of escape. No overseer can count the visions that pass through a worker's tired head. The body may belong to labour by day, but the night gives the mind a country without borders. Perhaps this is why ancient people took dreams seriously. Not because they were foolish, but because they understood that the private world has consequences. A dream can change a decision. A warning can delay a journey. A vision can strengthen a claim. A nightmare can reveal fear that waking pride refuses to name. A dream can make someone believe they have been addressed directly by the unseen. That belief alters the person. It may lead to obedience, but it may also lead to courage. It may confirm tradition or quietly disturb it. A ruler who dreams of disaster may seek counsel. A mother who dreams of her dead child may carry grief differently. A scribe who dreams of unreadable signs may wake with a new respect for silence, which would be healthy for scribes generally. The night keeps teaching. Toward dawn, the city shifts again. Roosters cry. A dog barks once, as if announcing a legal opinion nobody requested. Pale light touches the upper edge of the temple. People wake and return to their tasks, carrying invisible fragments from the dark. Some will tell their dreams, some will hide them, some will forget the details but keep the mood. That mood matters. It colours the day from beneath. The gods may send visions, and priests may interpret them, yet the dream itself happens inside a human being. There, beyond the reach of public ceremony, imagination receives, changes, fears, desires, and remembers. The divine message enters human depth, and human depth transforms it. So the temple can guide the ritual, the palace can command the street, but no authority, however ancient, can stand watch over every sleeping mind. The first thing you hear is not a voice, but the pause before a voice begins. A name waits in that pause. In the ancient city, names do not drift lightly over people like dust on a road. They fasten. They identify the child, summon the god, mark the slave, praise the king, curse the enemy, and preserve the dead. A name can be written on a seal, carved into a statue, pressed into clay, spoken in prayer, hidden in fear, or erased with deliberate cruelty. It is a small container with a dangerous amount inside. You stand near a courtyard where a newborn is being held in the shade. The morning is warm, and the smell of milk, wool, and crushed herbs softens the air. Women speak quietly. A father waits with a face arranged into seriousness, which fools no one. Somewhere nearby, a goat chews at a basket it absolutely knows is not food. Life enters the household with noise, need, and a name waiting to be chosen. In Mesopotamia, personal names often carried meaning. Many invoked gods, expressed gratitude, declared hope, or remembered family devotion. A child might be named as a prayer, a statement, or a small theological argument wrapped in ordinary affection. Modern scholars at Cambridge and Yale have studied these names as evidence for private religion, because they reveal what families wanted the divine world to know. Not only kings spoke to heaven, households did too. That is an important truth. A name can turn a baby into a sentence. Perhaps the name says a god has given life. Perhaps it asks a goddess to protect the child. Perhaps it remembers a lost relative. Perhaps it declares that the family still trusts the divine, even after grief has moved through the house and left its cold hand on everything. The name is intimate, yet public. It belongs to one body, but carries a whole network of hope. The gods have names too, and their names are heavy. To speak the name of a deity is not like labelling an object. It is an act of recognition. Names organize divine presence. They divide powers, link places, establish roles, and make the invisible addressable. Without a name, a power is difficult to approach. With a name, it can be praised, feared, invoked, and remembered. Naming brings relationship, but relationship is not control. This is where the mystery deepens. The gods may receive names from ancient tradition, but humans preserve and multiply those names. Scribes copy lists of deities, priests chant them, families invoke them, storytellers reshape them, cities emphasize one god, then another. A divine name moves through human mouths, and each mouth adds breath, fear, longing, habit, and interpretation. Even a god's name must travel through human memory. That's a curious dependence. A temple statue may stand in splendour, but if no one speaks the name, the presence grows faint in human society. A king may dedicate offerings, but if scribes stop writing his titles, his glory becomes vulnerable. An ancestor may have lived, loved, argued, sneezed, and complained about the price of onions, but without a name remembered, the person begins to blur into the general darkness of the dead. Ancient people understood this danger. To erase a name was a serious act. It could be political punishment, ritual destruction, or an attempt to cut someone away from remembrance. Kings sometimes had the inscriptions of rivals damaged or replaced. Statues could be defaced. Names could be scratched out with focused hostility. It is hard not to admire the commitment, although perhaps from a safe distance. Mainstream history confirms that inscriptions served power in early Mesopotamia. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania and the Oriental Institute have shown how royal names, building dedications, and foundation deposits linked rulers with temples and gods. A name placed in a wall or beneath a structure claimed endurance. It said, in effect, remember who made this. Remember who stood between city and heaven. Yet the survival of a name remains uncertain. A brick may break. A tablet may be buried. A palace may burn. A later ruler may overwrite the record with the confidence of someone who thinks history has a delete button. Time, however, is an unreliable employee. Sometimes the erased name returns from the ground. Sometimes the forgotten tablet survives better than the monument meant to last forever. Clay has opinions. A fringe tidbit circles the power of names in many modern, esoteric readings of Sumerian texts. Some claim that divine names functioned like codes, keys, or hidden frequencies able to command unseen forces. Historians do not treat these claims as proven fact, yet they grow from something real. Ancient ritual language often treated correct naming as powerful. To identify a god, demon, illness, or protective force could be the first step in responding to it. The scholarly debate is more careful but equally interesting. Some linguists study names as social evidence. Some historians of religion see them as devotional acts. Some literary scholars ask how naming shapes identity in myth, especially when a hero receives, loses, or seeks a lasting name. The debate remains open because names are never only words. They are social tools, emotional relics, and claims against disappearance. You walk into a scribal room where name lists are copied. The light is thin, filtered through a doorway. Tablets lie in rows. A teacher recites, and students repeat with varying levels of enthusiasm, which is to say, some are mentally in the marsh already. The list moves from divine names to cities, professions, objects, animals, and places. The world is being arranged by sound and sign. There is comfort in that. There is also power. To name something is to draw it out of the blur. A field becomes this field. A person becomes this person. A god becomes this presence. A debt becomes undeniable. A boundary becomes contestable, which is less convenient but very human. Once named, things can be remembered, recorded, argued over, inherited, cursed, praised, sold, lost, and mourned. Naming makes the world sharper. The gods may create categories, but humans live inside the edges of them. They discover that a name can protect, wound, elevate, disguise, or survive. A servant may bear a humble name, yet secretly treasure the meaning given by a mother. A king may surround his name with titles, yet fear being forgotten. A scribe may write someone else's name all day, then quietly long for his own to matter. That longing is profound. It is the human refusal to vanish without a trace. In myth, the search for a lasting name often stands beside the fear of death. To live briefly is one thing. To be forgotten is another. A person who knows death is coming may desire children, monuments, songs, or tablets. These are not immortality exactly, but they are negotiations with absence. They say that a breath once passed here, a mind once looked out, a pair of hands once touched clay, bread, skin, water, and grief. The name remains when the body cannot. You feel the cool surface of a cylinder seal against your palm. It is small enough to carry, yet its carved design can stamp identity again and again. Rolled across wet clay, it leaves an image and a claim. This belongs to someone. This agreement has a witness. This door, jar, tablet, or bundle has been marked. Identity becomes repeatable. The seal is almost a private emblem, a portable self. It is not the whole person, of course. No object can hold the smell of their hair, the weight of their worry, or the exact way they laughed when a joke was almost inappropriate for a temple courtyard. But it holds enough to function. It lets the person appear where the body is absent. That is another human power. Presence can be extended. A name written on clay can speak across distance. A seal impression can authorize action. A hymn can carry divine praise through generations. A lament can preserve the name of a ruined city. The gods may own greatness, but humans learn continuity. They send identity forward through signs, sounds, and memory. Near evening, the newborn's name has been spoken many times. It already sounds less strange. The family repeats it with tenderness, testing how it sits in the mouth. The child sleeps, unaware that a small verbal shelter has been built around them. Outside, the city moves towards dusk. Above the roofs, the temple glows in the last light. Somewhere a scribe writes a royal name. Somewhere a widow whispers a dead name. Somewhere a child learns that the world has names because the world can be held in memory, and perhaps that is the secret inside the name. The gods can be called, kings can be praised, enemies can be cursed, and the dead can be summoned in sorrow. Yet the act of naming gives humans a strange share in creation itself. They do not make the river, but they name it. They do not command death, but they speak against forgetting. The bronze light of morning falls across a palace wall, and authority begins to dress itself. You stand in a courtyard where servants move with careful speed. Water is poured into basins. Fine cloth is shaken free of dust. A carved chair is polished until its surface catches the sun. Guards wait near the entrance, their spears upright, their faces arranged into the hard expression of men who have been told not to blink unless history permits it. Soon, the king will appear. In the Sumerian world, kingship is never only political. It stands between earth and sky, field and temple, labour and ritual, city and god. The ruler is not usually a god in the full sense, though some later kings reach toward that dangerous height. More often, he is chosen, favoured, appointed, or strengthened by the divine realm. He builds temples, leads armies, judges disputes, digs canals, and claims to maintain order. That is a heavy costume. It shines, but it weighs. Mainstream records confirm that early Mesopotamian rulers used inscriptions to present themselves as builders, protectors, and servants of the gods. Archaeological work connected with the University of Pennsylvania, Chicago, and British Museum collections has preserved royal inscriptions naming rulers of cities such as Lagash, Ur, and Uruk. These texts speak of temples razed, canals restored, enemies defeated, and divine favour received. A king does not merely say, "I wanted this." He says the god entrusted this to me. The difference matters. Divine approval turns ambition into duty. It places human power inside a sacred frame, which is extremely convenient if you happen to be the human holding power. A ruler commands men to move earth, cut stone, carry bricks, fight enemies, and pay tribute. Yet the command sounds larger when heaven appears behind it. The king becomes a hinge. Through him, the divine will enter the city, or at least that is the official version delivered with impressive robes. You watch him step into public view. His hair is oiled, his garment is clean. His beard, if he wears one, has been arranged with the seriousness ancient people gave to facial hair and modern people give to passwords. Attendants stand close. Musicians wait. Petitioners lower their eyes. The palace courtyard fills with the controlled silence that gathers around danger, ceremony, and expensive furniture. The king is human, yet everyone behaves as though more than human order surrounds him. This is the heart of the tension. The ruler must seem close to the gods, but not so close that his mortality becomes embarrassing. He eats, tires, ages, fears illness, and depends on advisors who may privately think he is wrong. He needs scribes to preserve his greatness, soldiers to enforce it, farmers to feed it, and priests to bless it. His authority descends from heaven, but its feet remain firmly in mud. A quirky fringe tidbit follows the old king lists, where rulers before the flood are given reigns so vast that they seem almost inhuman. Some modern interpreters imagine these impossible ages as memories of semi-divine beings, hidden dynasties, or a lost pre-human order. Scholars do not accept those claims as straightforward history, yet the tradition is revealing. Ancient writers imagined kingship as older, deeper, and stranger than ordinary government. Kingship descends. That phrase sounds calm, but it opens a dark stairway. If kingship comes from above, then the human king is never merely a manager of fields. He carries an institution believed to pre-exist him. He occupies a role that seems almost cosmic, but because he is human, he also brings appetite, vanity, insecurity, courage, impatience, tenderness, and the occasional spectacularly bad decision into the sacred machinery. The office may be divine. The office holder still needs breakfast. Scholars continue to debate how much early kingship grew from war leadership, temple administration, irrigation management, or household power. Some historians at Harvard and Oxford emphasize conflict and competition between cities. Others focus on economic coordination and ritual authority. Many agree that the ruler's image was carefully shaped through monuments, seals, offerings, and texts, because power must be seen to be believed. That need for display reveals something fragile. True omnipotence does not need a procession. It does not require carved inscriptions reminding everyone who fixed the canal. Human kingship, even when wrapped in divine language, must repeat itself. It must persuade. It must renew awe. It must stage order so that people remember to obey. Ceremony is not only confidence, it is maintenance. You move through the palace in thought. Storerooms are filled with jars, textiles, metal tools, and grain. Scribes sit with tablets on their knees, recording deliveries and obligations. The smell is dry and dense, part dust, part wool, part sealed oil. A messenger arrives from a border district. A dispute waits outside. A priest requests materials for a ritual. A commander wants more men. A widow wants justice. The king sits at the centre, but the centre is not rest. It is pressure from every side. Here, human ambition becomes visible under sacred paint. A ruler may truly believe he serves the gods. He may also enjoy victory, wealth, praise, and the sight of his name pressed into clay by obedient scribes. These motives are not simple. Ancient people were not cardboard figures wearing nice skirts and making offerings all day. They were as layered as people now, only with more barley and fewer customer service surveys. A king can pray sincerely and still desire glory. That mixture is exactly what makes him human. The gods may choose him, but they cannot entirely cleanse him of inward complexity. He hears hymns calling him mighty, wise, shepherd of the people, beloved of a deity. Perhaps part of him believes every word. Perhaps another part remembers a childhood fear, a brother's rivalry, a fever, an insult, a night when he wondered whether the god truly spoke to him or whether people simply needed him to say so. That private uncertainty is beyond public inscription. No royal text says, "I built this temple while quietly doubting myself at supper." No monument records, "I was afraid the campaign would fail." Official memory smooths the face of power. It edits worry, hesitation, resentment, and the strange loneliness of being obeyed. Yet those feelings must have existed, because kings were made of the same mortal substance as everyone else. The divine system requires them to appear stable. Human inwardness makes them unstable. You stand beside a canal dedication ceremony. Workers line the bank, their arms tired from months of digging. Priests sprinkle water. Musicians play. The king offers words that bind the project to divine favour. The canal gleams in the sun, carrying water toward fields that will feed the city. This is real achievement. Without such works, famine stalks the plain. Authority is not only theatre, it can build life. Yet someone in the crowd may look at the flowing water and think of the hands that bled for it. Someone may wonder why the king receives the inscription while the diggers receive sore backs. Someone else may feel pride because the city has endured. The same event creates loyalty, resentment, awe, memory, and quiet calculation. Power cannot command a single interpretation. That is the danger. A king stands between earth and sky, but beneath him, minds are moving. Scribes choose formulas, priests frame rituals, workers tell stories, families judge whether rule feels just, enemies compose curses, supporters compose praise. The king may try to hold divine order in his hands, yet his image lives in other people's thoughts, where it can change shape. By evening, the palace lamps burn low. The ruler is no longer in the courtyard. The guards relax slightly. Somewhere, food is served. Somewhere, tablets are stored. The city outside settles into its own layered darkness. The temple still rises against the stars, and the palace wall still carries the warmth of the day. The king has spoken for heaven, but others will remember what they heard And in that gap between royal command and human interpretation, ambition reveals its secret weakness. No ruler, no matter how sacred his title, can fully govern the mind that watches him from the crowd. The room is small, warm, and full of quiet rebellion. You sit in the shade of a scribal school, where dust hangs in the light like powdered time. The floor is packed earth, rubbed smooth by generations of feet. Clay tablets rest on low benches. A reed stylus lies beside a bowl of water. Outside, a street mutters with donkeys, vendors, and sandals. But inside the room, the world narrows to signs. A teacher speaks. Students repeat. The words are old, but the mouths are young. This is where memory learns discipline. A child does not become a scribe by inspiration alone, which is tragic news for every lazy genius in history. The signs must be copied again and again. Hands cramp, lines lean. Mistakes are scraped away while the clay remains damp. The teacher corrects with the calm cruelty of someone who has corrected the same error since sunrise. Yet something powerful is happening beneath the boredom. The scribe learns that the world can be stored. Grain, beer, sheep, fields, workers, silver, dates, oil, marriages, lawsuits, hymns, laments, myths, jokes, proverbs, and curses all enter the same strange kingdom of marks. A reed presses a wedge into clay, and absence becomes less complete. A spoken word, which should vanish into air, gains a second body. It can travel, it can wait, it can be read by someone not yet born. That is not merely administration, that is a quiet defiance of time. Mainstream historical research confirms that Mesopotamian scribes were central to the growth of early states. Temple economies, law, literature, and education. Scholars at Yale, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied school tablets showing exercises, lexical lists, model contracts, and literary copies. These tablets reveal not only record-keeping truel, but training, correction, humour, frustration, and a deeply organised culture of learning. The scribe stands in a strange position. He serves power, yet he preserves more than power intended. He records temple goods, royal victories, land transfers, and legal judgments. He also copies ancient songs, debate poems, wisdom sayings, and stories in which kings fail, gods quarrel, and humans ask uncomfortable questions. The same hand that supports authority can accidentally protect doubt. Clay is patient with contradictions. A palace may commission praise, but a school preserves satire. A temple may require hymns, but a scribe also records complaints. A ruler may demand that his name endure, yet scribes keep older names alive beside his own. Writing serves the system, but memory is never fully loyal. It collects too much. You picture a young scribe bending over a tablet as evening cools the room. His hair falls forward, his fingers are stained with clay. He copies a line about a king favoured by the gods. Then perhaps he copies a proverb about a poor man, a dishonest official, or a lazy student. The official world and the ordinary world sit together on the same shelf. This is almost dangerous. Writing flattens hierarchy in one peculiar way. Not socially, not legally, not in terms of food or status, but materially. A royal inscription and a schoolboy joke can both become clay. A divine hymn and a receipt for onions can both survive a fire. A great king and a grumpy creditor may wait for thousands of years in the same museum case, which is democracy of a very dusty kind. The gods may prefer hymns. The clay keeps inventories. A quirky fringe tidbit grows from this survival. Some modern readers imagine that scribal tablets contain hidden codes, secret star knowledge, or fragments of a lost universal wisdom. Most such claims wander far beyond evidence, wearing very confident sandals. Still, the impulse is understandable. The tablets feel like sealed rooms. Their signs are small, dense, and ancient. They seem to promise that if you read carefully enough, some forbidden system might open. The real secret is quieter. The scribes preserved human complexity. That is more astonishing than any invented code. They preserved a world where people made contracts, adored gods, mocked fools, feared demons, taught children, sued neighbours, praised kings, mourned cities, and worried about wages. The tablets reveal not a single solemn civilization frozen in ritual, but a living society full of tension, intelligence, routine, and wit. Scholars continue to debate the social identity of scribes. Some were attached to temples or palaces. Some worked for private households. Some came from elite families, while others may have risen through training and usefulness. Historians at Oxford and Harvard have explored whether scribal education reinforced hierarchy or created limited avenues for movement. The answer seems layered, because writing both served authority and gave certain individuals rare power over memory. That power could be subtle. A scribe decides how to phrase an event. He selects the formula, preserves the title, omits the embarrassment, smooths the contradiction, or keeps it by accident. He may not be free in the modern sense. He may be watched, trained, and bound by tradition. Yet every act of copying requires attention, and attention is never completely empty. Even obedience leaves fingerprints. A copied text is not merely a duplicate. It is a human performance. The scribe reads, understands, misreads, corrects, arranges, and sometimes alters. A line may be updated, a sign may shift, a story may travel into another language and take on a new shade. Across generations, scribes become a chain of quiet interpreters, each one touching the past and handing it forward. No god can fully control that chain. A divine command can be written, but writing creates readers. Readers compare, readers remember older versions, readers notice differences. Readers ask why one tablet says one thing and another says something else. The written word strengthens authority, then gives future minds the tools to examine it. That is the scribe's quiet rebellion. Not shouting in the street, not breaking the temple gate, only preserving enough words that no single voice can own the entire story. You hear the scratch of the reed against clay. It is a tiny sound, nearly nothing. Yet it marks a change in the human condition. A thought is no longer trapped inside the skull. A dispute no longer ends when the witnesses die. A hymn no longer depends only on a singer's memory. A joke can be ancient and still annoying, which is a major achievement for our species. The classroom grows dim. Students stretch their sore fingers. The teacher inspects one more tablet, sighs with theatrical disappointment, and perhaps secretly feels pleased. Outside, dusk turns the walls purple-brown. Smoke rises from cooking fires. The temple waits above the city, receiving its offerings. The palace waits behind its doors, guarding its claims. But in the schoolroom, another kind of power sleeps on shelves. Tablets hold signs. Signs hold voices. Voices hold people who were supposed to vanish. You sense the deeper unease now. The gods can demand ritual. Kings can command inscriptions, and temples can store records. Yet once writing exists, memory escapes its original owners. It can be buried, burned, broken, lost, recovered, translated, doubted, and read again under a different sky. The scribe may look harmless and seated with clay and reed. He is not harmless. He gives the human mind a second life outside the body, and nothing that can live twice is easily controlled. The room smells of cedar smoke, warm oil, and flowers beginning to fade. You stand near the edge of a shrine, where woven mats soften the floor and painted vessels catch the low light. A bronze bowl rests beside a small table. The air is intimate, almost too still, as if someone has just spoken words that cannot be taken back. Outside, the city breathes in its ordinary rhythm, but here the silence feels charged with longing, pride, and the sharp little thorn of refusal. This is the territory of the heart. The gods of Sumer do not live beyond emotion. They desire, rage, grieve, envy, love, hunger, and remember insults with impressive stamina. Their stories do not present divinity as calm perfection. They present divine power as alive with appetite. The sacred world is full of feeling, and feeling is never perfectly obedient. Inanna, goddess of love, war, power, and fierce selfhood, stands at the center of many such tensions. She is radiant, dangerous, persuasive, wounded, and wonderfully difficult. She seeks honor. She crosses boundaries. She descends where she should not go. She loves with intensity, and when love fails her, the world around her feels the consequence. She is not a gentle decoration. She's a storm with jewelry. Mainstream scholarship recognizes Inanna as one of the most important deities in Sumerian religion. Researchers at institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied hymns and myths that show her linked with sexuality, kingship, battle, and transformation. Her complexity is not a modern invention. The ancient texts themselves make her impossible to reduce to one simple role. That complexity matters because human emotion appears beside hers, not beneath it. In the tales surrounding Inanna and Dumuzi, desire and loss become forces that unsettle both divine and human arrangements. Dumuzi may be lover, shepherd, kingly figure, victim, or ritual presence, depending on the text and tradition. His fate is tangled in love, absence, mourning, seasonal pattern, and the terrible cost of choices made under pressure. You imagine a woman singing a lament in a dim courtyard. Her voice is low, almost worn smooth by repetition. Around her, other women listen. The smell of dust and wool mixes with incense drifting from a household shrine. The song may concern a god, but the grief is recognizably human. It has weight in the throat. It knows the body. Here, divine story becomes emotional practice. A lament for a god can teach people how to mourn their dead. A myth about desire can become a language for human attachment. A goddess's anger can provide shape for feelings too dangerous to speak plainly in a household ruled by elders, husbands, officials, or custom. The myth does not remove pain. It gives pain a chamber where echoes are allowed. That chamber cannot be fully controlled. You can order a ritual, but not the exact grief it awakens. You can instruct singers in the proper words, but not the private memories that rise inside the listeners. A widow may hear Dumuzi's name and think of a husband lost to fever. A young lover may hear Inanna's longing and feel both excitement and fear. A mother may hear the lament and remember a child whose name no longer fits easily in conversation. Emotion slips through the sacred form. A quirky fringe tidbit has grown around Inanna's descent, with some modern readers seeing it as a hidden map of initiation, planetary cycles, or secret teachings about the soul. Serious scholars treat such interpretations carefully, especially when they float too far from the clay texts. Yet the myth itself invites depth. A powerful goddess strips away ornaments, passes gates, loses status, confronts death, and returns changed. It is hard not to feel a human truth inside that pattern. Descent changes the one who descends. The scholarly debate remains rich and unsettled. Some historians interpret Inanna's myths through ritual and seasonal renewal. Some literary scholars focus on gender, power, and the drama of divine personality. Others study the texts as reflections of temple politics, royal ideology, and city identity. No single explanation quiets the goddess. She keeps moving under each interpretation. Perhaps that is why she feels so alive. Inanna's stories reveal something the gods themselves cannot master. They can provoke love, demand worship, and shape ritual desire, but they cannot control what love becomes inside human beings. Desire may begin as sacred energy, but in the human heart it becomes loyalty, jealousy, tenderness, shame, courage, longing, and refusal. Refusal is especially important. To refuse is to reveal an inward boundary. A person may be commanded, persuaded, blessed, threatened, praised or tempted, yet some final chamber of response remains hidden. A heart can say no quietly, even when the mouth says yes. A body can stand in ceremony while the mind withdraws into private weather. This is not always heroic. Human refusal can be foolish, cruel, stubborn, or born from fear. Ancient stories know that too. They do not flatter humanity into innocence. They show longing making terrible choices. They show pride overturning balance. They show grief bargaining with shadows. Still, even in error, the human heart displays a freedom that unsettles power. It reacts from within. You picture a bride in a household courtyard, listening to songs that celebrate union and fertility. Her hands smell faintly of oil and herbs. Her jewellery is heavy against her skin. Everyone has advice. Everyone is suddenly an expert in her future, which is a tradition apparently older than writing. Yet inside her, a private thought moves. It may be hope. It may be dread. It may be both. No tablet records it. No god entirely owns it. The same is true in the world of mourning. A city can prescribe lamentation. A priest can lead the rite. Professional singers can shape grief into established phrases. But the heart chooses where the words land. One listener may feel release. Another may feel anger. Another may feel nothing, and then feel guilty for feeling nothing, because humans are talented at making inner life more complicated than necessary. This complexity is the uncontrollable ability growing clearer in the texts. Humans do not merely receive divine emotion. They interpret it through personal memory. They change cosmic drama into household meaning. They take the grief of a goddess and place inside it the face of someone they loved. They hear the fate of a divine lover and recognize the instability of their own attachments. The gods can be larger than humans, but they are not more inward than humans. That is the strange reversal. Divine beings in the myths may have greater force, longer reach, and terrifying authority. Yet human emotion has an interior depth that no command can fully map. A god may send desire, but not decide whether it becomes devotion or resentment. A goddess may inspire awe, but not determine every private association born in the worshipper's mind. The shrine grows darker. A lamp flame bends and steadies. The flowers near the bowl release a tired sweetness. Someone outside laughs, then lowers their voice as they pass the sacred door. The world continues, careless and tender at once. In this dimness, you sense why love and grief trouble order more than open violence sometimes does. Violence can be punished. Disobedience can be named. But longing hides inside duty. Sorrow hides inside song. Refusal hides inside silence. A person may kneel while inwardly travelling far away. The gods may receive the offering. They may never receive the heart entire. And so the oldest stories of desire do more than praise divine power. They reveal the place where power meets its limit. Not at the edge of the city, not at the wall of the temple, not in battle beneath a red sky. The limit waits quietly inside the human chest. There, love becomes memory, grief becomes song, and refusal becomes a door no god can simply force open. The sky lowers until it feels close enough to crush the reed roofs. You stand beside the river when the air turns strange. The usual brightness has drained from the plain, and a grey weight gathers over the fields. Workers look up from the canal banks. A shepherd calls his animals closer. In the distance, thunder moves like a cart across stone. Though there are no stones here large enough to explain it. The water smells different. It smells of depth disturbed. Flood stories in Mesopotamia carry one of the oldest human fears. That the world beneath your feet may suddenly remember it is not yours. The river that feeds the city can also erase it. The canals that bring life can become channels of ruin. Mud brick walls, so patient in the sun, soften under relentless rain and rising water. A city made from earth can return to earth with terrifying speed. This is why flood traditions feel so ancient. They are not only myths of punishment, They are memories of vulnerability. Mainstream archaeology confirms that southern Mesopotamia was a landscape shaped by rivers, marshes, shifting channels, and periodic flooding. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago have long studied how irrigation, silt, and water management influence city life. The region's fertility depended on controlled water, yet that control was always incomplete. The river was never an employee. It was more like a powerful relative who helped, threatened, and ignored instructions. Ancient people knew this intimately. You hear the first hard rains strike the baked ground. Dust rises, then collapses into dark spots. Goats bleat. Doors close. Someone shouts across a courtyard. The smell of wet clay returns everywhere at once. But now it is not the gentle smell of making. It is the smell of undoing. In Sumerian and later Mesopotamian flood traditions, the gods decide to destroy humanity, often because human noise or disorder has become unbearable. Yet one human is warned, directly or indirectly, and survives by building a vessel. The story appears in different forms across Mesopotamian literature, including the Sumerian flood story and later Akkadian versions. The names and details vary, but the emotional core remains steady. Destruction comes from above and around, but memory escapes on water. That escape matters more than the boat. The boat saves bodies, animals, seeds, and the possibility of tomorrow. But the survivor also carries witness. He remembers what the world was before the flood. He remembers divine wrath, human terror, and the fragile absurdity of staying alive while everything familiar disappears. Without that memory, survival would be only breathing. With it, survival becomes testimony. A fringe tidbit often surrounds these flood stories. Some modern writers treat them as proof of a single global catastrophe, or as a preserved report from a vanished civilization that knew the true history of the earth. Scholars are cautious with such claims, because the evidence points to layered literary traditions shaped by local experience, theology, and storytelling. Still, it is easy to understand why the imagination wanders there. Flood stories feel older than paper. They feel carved into the nervous system. Water leaves few witnesses. That is why one witness becomes sacred. The open scholarly debate concerns how these traditions relate to real floods, ritual thinking, and literary transmission. Some historians view them as mythic reflections of environmental danger in river societies. Some scholars of religion see them as meditations on divine justice and human dependence. Others examine how later writers reshaped earlier stories, turning local disaster into cosmic drama. The debate remains alive because the flood is both event and symbol. You stand now in the rising storm. The street is a channel. The courtyard is a pool. Baskets float past with pathetic dignity. A dog scrambles onto a ledge and looks personally betrayed by weather. The temple terrace remains high for a while, but the lower city fills with brown water. Storehouses leak. Walls sag. The carefully counted world becomes uncountable. A man grips a post and calls a name. A woman lifts a child onto her shoulder. A jar of grain splits and spills into the current. Everything ordinary becomes precious too late. That is the cruelty of disaster. It reveals value at the moment of loss. A doorway, a bowl, a sleeping mat, a familiar corner, the sound of a neighbour's voice, all become treasures once the water takes them. The gods may have intended silence. The flood creates a different sound. It is not the lively human noise of markets and schools. It is the roar of things losing their place. Roof beams crack. Animals cry. Rain hammers the river until river and sky seem like one body. Human voices rise briefly, then vanish into distance. Even prayer is difficult because terror has its own grammar, mostly breath and broken names. Yet somewhere in the tradition, warning happens. That is the strange mercy hidden inside the storm. Whether through Enki's cunning, a message through a wall, or another guarded method, knowledge slips past the divine decision. The plan to erase humanity is not perfectly sealed. A secret leaks. Instructions are given. A vessel is built. Life is loaded into a fragile structure and trusted to chaos. The gods cannot fully control compassion either, nor can they control what a warned human does with knowledge. The survivor must believe the warning, act on it, endure ridicule perhaps, gather what can be saved, and enter the vessel before certainty arrives. This is more than obedience. It is imagination under pressure. He must picture disaster before it becomes visible. He must prepare for a future others cannot yet see. That ability is deeply human. To imagine the future is to resist the present. In the hush beneath the storm, you sense how dangerous that is. A command controls now. Fear controls now. Hunger controls now. But imagination reaches ahead, beyond the visible boundary, and begins arranging survival. It says, not only what is happening, but what may happen. It builds boats before the flood. It stores grain before famine. It teaches children before elders die. It copies tablets before memory fades. The survivor is not only lucky, he is the bearer of continuity. When the waters recede in the old stories, the world is altered. Mud covers everything. The air smells of rot, silt, and exhausted rain. Birds circle uncertainly. The ground is soft under each step. Silence spreads where streets once argued with life. The survivor emerges into a world both saved and ruined. Then comes the offering. This moment is haunting. The survivor makes a sacrifice and the gods gather to its scent. The image is powerful because it reverses the apparent hierarchy. The gods who sought silence are drawn back by human ritual. The world they nearly emptied becomes meaningful again through the action of the one who remembers how worship is done. Humanity returns as witness and servant. Yes, but also as keeper. Keeper of ritual, keeper of names, keeper of animals, keeper of seeds, keeper of the terrible story itself. The gods may decide events, but humans preserve the moral discomfort of those events. They carry the question forward. Was the flood justice, irritation, fear, necessity, mistake? The texts do not allow the question to rest easily. Perhaps that is their power. A destroyed humanity would ask nothing. A surviving humanity asks forever. At dusk, after the imagined storm, the plain lies under a pale wash of water. Broken reeds drift against a wall. The last light spreads across the surface in trembling gold. Somewhere, a bird lands on debris and shakes its wings. The world smells raw, as if newly made and already grieving. You feel the survivor looking over it. He is small beneath the sky, smaller than the gods, smaller than the flood, smaller than the silence surrounding him. Yet inside him remains the one thing the waters did not drown. He remembers. He will speak. Someone will listen. Someone will shape the terror into words, and later someone will press those words into clay. So the flood fails completely at one task. It does not end the human story. It gives the story a darker beginning. The marsh grows silver under moonlight, and something old moves beneath the water. Not a beast. Not exactly. More like a memory with fins. The reeds stand tall and black against the sky, whispering as the night wind combs through them. Frogs click in the shallows. A fish breaks the surface and vanishes, leaving a circle of trembling light, far away. The city sleeps with its walls closed and its ovens cooling. Here, at the edge of water, knowledge feels amphibious. It belongs partly to land, partly to depth. In later Mesopotamian tradition, strange figures called sages are remembered as bringers of civilization. They are linked with wisdom, ritual skill, ancient kings, and a time so early that ordinary history grows misty around it. Some accounts describe them as beings connected with the waters, sometimes imagined with fish-like features, emerging to teach humanity the arts needed for ordered life. The image is unforgettable. A teacher rises from the deep, carrying not a weapon, but knowledge. You can almost see him standing near the reed bank, half shadow, half moonlit outline. Water streams from his body. His face is calm, perhaps too calm. Behind him, the marsh breathes. In front of him, human beings wait with fear, curiosity, and the slightly awkward posture of people who suspect they are about to receive homework from a supernatural fishman. The old world has a sense of humour, even when it is sacred. Mainstream scholarship treats these sage traditions with care, especially because some fuller versions come from later Mesopotamian lists and priestly lore. Researchers at Cambridge, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied the sages as figures of learned authority, connected with ritual knowledge and the memory of deep antiquity. They are not treated as historical teachers in a simple modern sense. They are symbolic guardians of culture, wisdom, and continuity. Yet symbols can reveal real anxieties. The sages stand at the border between human and divine knowledge. They are not ordinary farmers, not kings, not gods in the highest sense. They occupy a middle place. They bring arts from beyond normal human reach, but those arts enter human hands. That is the delicate problem. Once wisdom crosses the border, it does not remain safely divine. It becomes teachable. A taught skill can travel, a travelling skill can change. The sages are sometimes connected with kings who ruled in the earliest age, a time imagined as remote, powerful, and partially lost. This early world feels like a sealed chamber beneath later history. It is not merely old, it is foundational. It is where the first patterns are laid down, where kingship, ritual, craft, and order begin to take recognizable shape. But the traditions also suggest that knowledge can be dangerous if too much is remembered. A ruler who remembers old patterns can claim legitimacy. A priest who remembers old rites can control access to the sacred. A scribe who remembers older texts can compare them with newer claims. A society that remembers too much may become difficult to deceive, which is inconvenient for nearly everyone in authority. This is why the sages feel unsettling. They do not only teach humanity how to live, they connect humanity to a depth that kings and gods may not entirely regulate. Their wisdom comes from a time outside ordinary civic memory, a time long before recorded history, or at least before history becomes steady under the hand of the scribe. In that misty age, knowledge arrives as inheritance, not invention. A fringe tidbit has made these figures famous among modern speculators. Some writers identify the sages with visitors from other worlds, survivors of lost continents, or coded descriptions of beings who brought advanced science. Serious historians do not accept these claims as evidence-based history. Still, the fascination is telling. The sages look like messengers from outside the normal human order, and their fish-like imagery makes them feel delightfully impossible. The scholarly debate remains grounded in texts, ritual, and intellectual history. Some scholars interpret the sages as mythic ancestors of priests and scholars, lending deep authority to learned professions. Others see them as literary figures who explain how civilization's arts reached humanity. Some examine their role in royal ideology, where ancient wisdom supports present power. The debate continues because the sages stand exactly where myth, memory, and institutional authority meet. You walk now through an imagined temple library at night. The room is cool. The smell of clay, dust, and old reed mats rest heavily in the air. Tablets are stacked on shelves. Some hold rituals, some hold omens, some preserve hymns, lists, incantations, and scholarly commentaries. A learned man lifts a tablet carefully and reads by lamplight, his face furrowed with concentration. He believes he's not inventing wisdom. He is receiving and maintaining it. That belief gives him dignity. It also gives him power. To claim ancient knowledge is to speak with borrowed depth. The words are no longer only yours. They come from elders, temples, cities, sages, and perhaps the beginning of the world. The listener is not merely hearing an opinion. The listener is meeting tradition, but tradition has a strange life. It depends on humans to preserve it, and humans are imperfect containers. They forget, embellish, simplify, hide, misunderstand, and sometimes improve things by accident, which is very annoying to anyone who likes neat categories. A ritual copied for centuries may change by a sign. A myth retold for a festival may gain a new shade. A scholarly list may preserve a name whose meaning has already become uncertain. The sages bring knowledge from depth. Humans turn it into history. That transformation is not small. Divine or semi-divine wisdom, once held in human institutions, becomes subject to human memory. It can be catalogued, debated, taught, miscopied, protected, stolen, and rediscovered. The sacred becomes scholarly. The mysterious becomes curriculum. The terrifying becomes an examination exercise, which is perhaps the most human fate imaginable. You hear students reciting old names by dull morning light. Their voices rise and fall. One yawns and tries to hide it. Another scratches a sign with care. On the tablet before them, the names of sages and kings stretch back into a time they cannot truly picture. They learn antiquity as a sequence, as if the past can be lined up politely and made to behave. But the past does not behave. It haunts. The idea of sages remembering too much points toward a deeper human ability. Humans do not merely receive knowledge for immediate use. They store it, surround it with reverence, and let it become identity. A canal technique becomes heritage. A hymn becomes tradition. A list of ancient kings becomes a claim about cosmic order. A story of beings from the deep becomes proof that civilization itself has roots below ordinary sight. Knowledge becomes depth inside the community. No god can fully control that once it spreads through families, schools, rituals, and libraries. A divine gift may have a source, but its meanings multiply among receivers. Human beings ask where knowledge came from, who owns it, why some have it and others do not, and what might be hidden beneath the official version. Those questions are quiet, but they endure. The marsh brightens as dawn approaches. The silver water turns grey, then pale gold. Reeds rustle. Birds begin calling from the shallows. The strange teacher from the deep is gone, whether he was vision, symbol, memory, or myth. Only footprints remain in the mud, already filling with water, yet the knowledge remains on land. It has entered hands, tongues, tablets, and habits. It has become craft, ritual, law, music, medicine, and doubt. The beings who were meant to serve have learned to preserve more than instructions. They preserve origins, or fragments of origins. They keep stories of teachers who came from places no king can inspect, and perhaps that is why the sages disturb the old order. They suggest that human wisdom has a source deeper than command. They suggest that once knowledge emerges from the dark water, it does not willingly return. The city has already fallen when you arrive in the wind. No army shouts now. No chariot wheels strike the street. No king stands beneath a bright canopy, promising that the gods will hold the walls forever. The gates hang damaged. The streets are drifted with dust. A broken jar lies near a doorway, its curve catching the pale afternoon light. Somewhere, a loose shutter taps softly, as if the house still expects someone to answer. Ruins have their own breathing. It is slower than life. You walk through what had once been a place of bread, trade, quarrel, prayer, and water jars cooling in shaded rooms. The mud brick walls have sagged into rounded shapes. Weeds push through cracks where feet once polished the ground. The temple platform remains visible above the city, but its surface is scarred by abandonment. Its steps no longer carry a procession. Its rooms no longer smell of oil, flowers, and prepared food. The god is gone, or so the lament says. In Sumerian city laments, devastation is not described merely as military defeat, it is cosmic sorrow. Cities such as Nippur, Eridu, and others become mourned as living presences. Their destruction is imagined as divine abandonment, storm, fate, and human catastrophe all woven together. The city weeps, the goddess grieves, the people scatter, the sacred order is torn like cloth in a violent hand. Mainstream historians recognize these laments as some of the most powerful literary works from ancient Mesopotamia. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied them as responses to political collapse, especially the fall of major city-states and dynasties. They combine historical memory, temple ritual, theology, and poetry. They do not read like simple reports. They read like grief trying to build a house from ashes. That is their force. A record can say a city fell. A lament makes you stand inside the fall. You hear women crying in courtyards no longer safe. You hear old men calling names that do not return. You hear cattle driven away, doors broken, shrines emptied, and grain stores lost. The sky itself seems to lower over the plain. Dust stings the eyes. Smoke leaves a bitter taste in the throat. The city is not only conquered, it is unmade. And yet, strangely, it survives as song. That is the human power hidden in ruin. Destruction may scatter bodies, break walls, and carry treasures away. But grief gathers what violence leaves behind. It does not rebuild the city in brick. It rebuilds the city in memory. It says the streets mattered. The dead mattered. The temple mattered. The ordinary doorway mattered. The loss will not be allowed to pass as if nothing happened. Grief refuses erasure. This refusal unsettles the divine system. If a city falls because the gods have decreed it, then lament should perhaps submit. But the laments do something more complicated. They mourn, protest, plead, remember, and even circle the question of why the gods permitted such ruin. They accept divine power, but they do not make suffering neat. Suffering is never neat. A quirky fringe tidbit appears when modern readers treat these laments as memories of cataclysms far beyond war. Perhaps ancient blasts, sky fire, or lost technologies destroying cities. Serious historians do not need such theories to explain the texts. War, political collapse, famine, and social trauma are more than enough. Still, the language of cosmic devastation can feel immense, because grief naturally speaks in worlds ending. To the grieving, one city is the world. The open scholarly debate concerns how the laments were used. Some researchers interpret them as temple rituals meant to persuade deities to return. Others see them as political literature, helping later rulers frame restoration as sacred duty. Literary scholars study their voices, where city, goddess, and community blend into one sorrowing presence. Each approach reveals a different layer, and none fully empties the clay of meaning. You stand before a ruined shrine where weeds have entered the threshold. The air smells of dust, dry grass, and old smoke. A small offering bowl lies cracked on the floor. Perhaps once it held dates, oil, flour, or a little beer. Perhaps someone placed it there with trembling hands, asking for protection that did not come. The silence feels personal. It is tempting to imagine ancient people accepting disaster with simple fatalism. The tablets say otherwise. They argued with loss through poetry. They gave devastation a voice. They described the city as a mother bereaved, a bride abandoned, a house stripped bare, a field trampled, a sacred place emptied of its shining presence. They didn't merely record pain. They shaped it. Shaping pain is an act of survival. A conqueror may break a wall, but cannot decide how the defeated will remember the breaking. A god may depart, but cannot fully control the song sung in the absence. A king may claim victory, but the lament can preserve the cost in another register. Softer and more enduring than triumph. The public inscription boasts. The lament breathes. One is stone-faced. The other has tears. Through lament, humans take catastrophe into language. That does not make them stronger than death. It does not make their children return. It does not refill the granaries or raise the fallen gate, but it gives grief form, and form allows grief to be shared. Shared grief becomes communal memory. Communal memory becomes identity. Identity becomes a way to continue. This is why ruined cities can remain powerful long after their walls decay. They become sacred wounds in the imagination. People return to them in ritual, story, and song. They speak their names. They ask why they fell. They promise restoration. They turn broken places into moral landscapes where human beings learn the cost of pride, violence, abandonment, and time. You move through the empty street as evening gathers. The sun reddens the dust. A bird calls from a broken roof beam. In a doorway, someone once waited for a husband, a sister, a child, a messenger, a debtor who definitely claimed he was coming tomorrow. Now the doorway frames only shadow frames, yet the shadow has been noticed. That matters. A lament notices what power often ignores. It notices the old, the poor, the unnamed, the frightened, the hungry, the mothers holding children, the temple singers without a temple, the artisans without workshops, the dead without proper mourning. It widens memory beyond royal victory and divine decree. It insists that history belongs also to those crushed beneath it. The gods may rule fate, but humans preserve sorrow, and sorrow is not passive. It questions by existing. It asks what kind of order requires such breaking. It asks whether a city can be beloved and abandoned in the same breath. It asks whether restoration can ever repay loss. It asks why the heart continues attaching itself to things that time will damage. Perhaps the gods cannot control grief because grief is love after power has failed. The last light slips from the temple platform. The ruins darken into one broad shape against the sky. You feel the city becoming less a place and more a memory, less a wound and more a voice carried through generations. The lament rises somewhere in the mind, slow and low, like wind moving through reeds beside a river. The walls have fallen, the song remains, and in the song the lost city refuses to disappear completely. A reed mat is spread beneath the shade, and two voices prepare to disagree. The day is hot, but the courtyard has been swept clean. A jar of water stands near the wall, its clay sides dark with coolness. Students gather in a loose circle, some alert, some pretending to be alert with heroic determination. Their teacher holds a tablet and watches them over tired eyes. Somewhere outside, a donkey brays as if defending a legal thesis. Then the argument begins. In ancient Sumerian literature, debate poems turn ordinary things into speakers. Summer and winter argue. The hoe and the plough compare themselves. Bird and fish boast. Tree and reed stand against each other. Silver and copper, cattle and grain. Even tools and seasons enter structured verbal contests. Each side praises itself, mocks the rival, and tries to prove its own superiority before a final judgment. It sounds playful. It is also deeply revealing. These debates show a world in which comparison becomes art. Humans do not merely receive categories from gods, temples, or kings. They test them. They place two forces side by side and ask which serves life better, which deserves honour, which carries hidden weakness, and which should be laughed at. The form is charming, but beneath the charm lies a dangerous habit. The mind learns to weigh. Mainstream scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied Sumerian debate poems as part of scribal education and literary culture. These works trained memory, style, reasoning, and the ability to handle inherited themes with skill. They also reflect real social concerns, including agriculture, seasonal order, craft production, food supply, and the value of different kinds of labour. So the classroom is not idle. It is a workshop of judgment. You listen as one voice praises grain, calling attention to bread, beer, offerings, and the fullness of storehouses. Another voice may answer for cattle, speaking of milk, meat, hides, sacrifice, and wealth on the hoof, each side exaggerates, because argument without exaggeration is apparently a thing humanity has never found entertaining. The students smile, the teacher pretends not to, yet the form matters more than the laughter. A debate poem allows contradiction to stand in public. It does not erase conflict by command. It stages conflict, shapes it, enjoys it, and then gives it a resolution. That resolution may favour one side, but the defeated voice has already spoken. It has already made its case. It has already entered memory. This is more radical than it first appears. In a strictly ordered world, every being has a place. Gods have domains, kings have titles, workers have duties, fields have boundaries, rituals have correct times. Yet debate poetry invites the imagination to loosen those places. A fish becomes eloquent. A tool becomes proud. A season becomes jealous. The ordinary world begins to speak back. The gods command order. Humans give order across examination. A quirky fringe tidbit follows this literary habit into modern speculation. Some readers have imagined the debates as fragments of hidden philosophical schools, or even coded disputes between ancient cults preserving secret rival sciences. There is no strong evidence for such dramatic claims. Still, the poems do preserve something remarkable, an early delight in structured disagreement. They show that argument itself had value, not only as conflict but as intellectual play. The open scholarly debate concerns the purpose of these texts. Some researchers interpret them mainly as school exercises. Others see them as ritualized reflections of cosmic balance, where opposing forces are compared before divine or royal authority. Literary scholars emphasize their humor, sophistication, and social commentary. The disagreement among scholars is fitting, really. Even the debate poems are still causing debate, which feels almost suspiciously successful. You sit closer to the scribal circle. The clay tablet is damp in a student's palm. He reads a line, hesitates, and corrects himself. His voice is careful, because everyone knows the teacher hears mistakes with supernatural efficiency. Another student answers with the opposing passage. Their words move in balanced rhythm like two boats passing on a canal. Praise, insult, evidence, boast, reply. The mind follows the exchange. It must hold both sides at once. That is the hidden training. To understand a debate, you must temporarily enter each voice. You must imagine why the reed might claim importance, why the tree might answer, why summer might boast, why winter might object. Even when one position wins, the listener has inhabited a world of multiple perspectives. Multiple perspectives make obedience complicated. A person trained to compare can compare more than tools and seasons. They can compare rulers. They can compare laws. They can compare what priests say with what life feels like. They can compare one city's god with another city's god, one story with another, one memory with an official inscription. The skill does not stay in the courtyard. It spreads inward. No system loves a mind that compares too freely. Of course, the ancient world did not become democratic simply because students copied witty arguments about farm equipment. That would be a lovely story, and far too convenient. Hierarchy remained strong. Power remained power. People were still bound by family, class, gender, debt, labour, and the ever-present possibility that someone important might be displeased. But intellectual habits matter. They accumulate like silt. A debate poem teaches that meaning is not always obvious. It teaches that value depends on use, context, perspective, and persuasion. It teaches that language can defend almost anything if handled skillfully enough, which is both admirable and alarming. It teaches listeners to enjoy the contest between claims rather than flee from uncertainty. That enjoyment is dangerous to absolute command. You imagine an ordinary worker hearing such a debate performed during a festival or in a school courtyard. Perhaps he laughs when one speaker insults another. Perhaps he remembers a line while digging. Perhaps he begins to think of his own trade as worthy of praise. Perhaps he imagines what he would say if his labour could speak. The poem gives a voice to things usually silent, and in doing so, It hints that silence is not natural. It is arranged. A tool speaks in the poem. Why not a servant in thought? A field speaks. Why not a widow in memory? A season defends itself. Why not a city after defeat? The debate no god silences is not merely the formal poem. It is the human tendency to stage inner councils. You do it whenever you wonder, hesitate, compare, regret, justify, or change your mind. One voice says, obey. Another says, wait. One voice says, this is sacred. Another says, perhaps it is useful to someone. One voice says, the world has always been this way. Another asks who benefits from saying so. A second voice is very old. It may whisper, but it stays. By late afternoon, the courtyard cools slightly. The students have finished their exercise. A few tablets are set aside to dry. The teacher rubs his forehead, perhaps wondering whether wisdom is worth the noise required to produce it. The jar of water is almost empty. Shadows lengthen along the wall. The debate ends, but thought continues. This is the subtle human ability rising through the clay signs. Not merely speaking, but holding opposition inside the mind without collapsing. Not merely knowing a rule, but testing it against another possibility. Not merely receiving order, but discovering that order can be described from more than one side. The gods may judge between rivals, kings may announce final decisions, teachers may mark the correct answer. Yet once the human mind learns the pleasure of argument, final answers become less final. A conclusion can be remembered, but so can the losing argument. A decree can be repeated, but so can the question that made it tremble. And somewhere in that shaded courtyard, among bored students and damp tablets, the ancient world quietly teaches humanity how to doubt with style. The marketplace opens like a many-voiced creature beneath the morning sun. You step into a street where shade is precious and everyone seems to know exactly what something is worth, especially when they are lying about it. Mats are spread near doorways, baskets of dates sit in dark heaps, fish lie silver and sharp smelling on reeds. Wool hangs in folded stacks. Pottery catches the light in dusty curves. A boy carries water through the crowd, trying not to spill it on a man already angry about onions. Here, the city becomes intimate. The temple may rise in sacred height, and the palace may guard its polished thresholds. But the market belongs to the restless middle of life. It is neither fully holy nor fully private. It is where hunger meets price, where craft meets need, where news walks faster than officials prefer. It is where the ordinary mind practices freedom in small, practical ways. A woman weighs barley in her hand. A potter praises his own jars as if they were born of royal ancestry. A brewer offers a sample with theatrical confidence. A shepherd argues over a lamb. A scribe sits near the edge of the crowd, ready to record a sale, a debt, or a dispute before memory begins improving itself for personal benefit. This is not chaos. It is negotiated order. Mainstream history shows that Sumerian cities depended on complex exchange, craft specialization, rations, temple storage, and private transactions. Scholars at Harvard, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied tablets that record goods, labor, loans, leases, marriages, and court cases. These documents reveal more than economy. They reveal a society where ordinary choices left marks, because daily life itself required judgment. Judgment is quiet power. A buyer judges quality. A seller judges desperation. A witness judges honesty. A judge hears claims and counterclaims. A debtor judges how long an excuse can survive before becoming an insult to everyone's intelligence. In all these acts, humans practice the art of navigating systems without being completely absorbed by them. The gods may establish categories. People bargain inside them. You move deeper through the market and feel the heat rising from the packed earth. The smell changes with each step. Fish, garlic, wool grease, sesame oil, sweat, dust, smoke, and crushed herbs under sandals. Someone laughs too loudly near a beer cellar. Someone else speaks in a low voice about a court decision. A child watches a copper tool glitter on a mat, already learning desire through the eyes. A city teaches wanting. This is another development the gods may not have planned. Service creates need, but cities multiply wants. A person needs bread, water, and shelter. But in the city, they also begin wanting better sandals, finer cloth, a stronger door latch, a brighter bead, a more reliable donkey, which is frankly a dream bordering on fantasy. Desire expands through comparison. You see what another person has, and your own life changes shape. That comparison can be painful. It can also be creative. Craftspeople improve their work because someone else may do it better. Traders learn routes because distant goods stir local imagination. Families save, borrow, risk, and scheme. The market becomes a school of practical cunning, where survival depends not only on obedience, but on reading faces, remembering prices, recognizing fraud, and knowing when to walk away. A quirky fringe tidbit sometimes attaches itself to ancient markets, where modern writers imagine lost networks of secret trade carrying forbidden metals, sacred herbs, or knowledge from vanished lands. Serious historians keep their feet on firmer ground, following tablets, seals, weights, and excavated objects. Yet the fascination is not baseless in mood. Mesopotamian exchange did reach beyond the plain, drawing in timber, stone, metals, shells, and luxury goods from distant regions. The city was never sealed. Its mind opened along trade routes. The open scholarly debate concerns how much power ordinary people held within these economic systems. Some researchers emphasize temple and palace control over land, labor, and distribution. Others point to private contracts, family archives, merchants, and local courts as signs of a more varied social landscape. The truth seems layered, because authority was strong, yet daily life remained full of negotiated spaces. Those spaces matter deeply. In a workshop, a metalworker heats copper until the air shivers. Sparks rise into the dimness. His hands know the colour of readiness, the smell of hot metal, the precise moment before a tool is ruined. This knowledge may serve temple, palace, or household, but it lives in his body. No decree can replace it. A ruler can command a blade. He cannot personally command the skill in every hammer stroke. In a weaving room, women sit close together, their fingers moving through fibre and pattern. Threads cross, tighten, and become cloth. Their conversation moves too, crossing from family news to complaints, jokes, warnings, and soft judgments about people who really should know better. Work and speech braid together. The cloth holds one pattern, the room holds another. In a tavern, the light is lower. Beer is thick, cloudy, and nourishing. People drink through straws from shared vessels. They talk more freely than they might before a temple official, though not always wisely, because beer has been assisting poor decisions since civilization was young. A tavern keeper listens. That alone gives her power. She hears debts, fears, boasts, secrets, flirtations, and foolish plans wrapped in confidence. The gods may receive formal prayers. The tavern receives human truth at a discount. Courts reveal another unruly space. Legal tablets show disputes over property, inheritance, marriage agreements, loans, and injury. These records are often dry, but behind the dry phrases live intense human moments. Someone feels cheated. Someone refuses to accept loss quietly. Someone brings witnesses. Someone insists that memory must be tested before a public authority. A lawsuit is a kind of speech. It says the powerful version of events is not the only version available. Even in a hierarchical society, the act of complaint matters. It requires the belief that a wrong can be named, that evidence can be arranged, and that another mind might be persuaded. This is imagination in civic form. Not every complaint wins. Still, the possibility changes people. You stand at the edge of the marketplace as the sun climbs higher. A merchant ties a bundle. A woman seals a jar. Two men argue over a measure with such intensity that one suspects the barley itself may request legal representation. A scribe presses signs into clay, capturing the agreement before memory becomes poetic. All around you, people adapt. They follow rules when useful, bend them when possible, resent them when heavy, and invoke them when needed. They honour gods, fear officials, love children, hide prophets, trust friends, suspect neighbours, and keep going. Their lives do not fit neatly into the grand story of divine service. They are too textured, too clever, too full of small decisions. This is the marketplace of unruly minds. Its rebellion is not dramatic. It lives in bargaining, choosing, refusing, comparing, remembering, and making. It lives in the skilled hand, the sharp tongue, the hidden savings jar, the private joke, the witness willing to speak, and the buyer who notices that the fish smells like yesterday pretending to be today. The city needs these minds. It also cannot fully master them. By evening, the market thins. Dust settles over trampled straw. Unsold goods are covered. The last customers drift away, carrying food, tools, gossip, and small satisfactions. The temple still stands above the roofs. The palace still claims order, but below, in the ordinary streets, human beings have spent the day making choices no god has counted completely. They have measured value. They have tested words. They have shaped life from need, appetite, skill, and doubt. And beneath all sacred structures are the daily choosing continues, humble and unstoppable. Night settles softly over the plain, and every living thing becomes temporary. You feel it first in the cooling walls. Mud brick releases the day's heat one breath at a time, as if the city itself has grown tired. Smoke from cooking fires thins into the dark. Dogs move between doorways with silent purpose. In a courtyard, someone covers a jar. In another, someone sits too still beside a lamp, listening to the breath of an old man who may not see morning. Mortality changes the room. It makes every sound more careful. The Sumerians did not imagine human life as endless joy beneath kindly stars. Their texts carry a sober awareness that people die, vanish, and enter a shadowed condition beyond ordinary comfort. The dead are remembered through offerings, burial customs, names, family duties, and lamentation. Death is not only a biological fact, it is a social obligation, a religious concern, and a wound in the household. Mainstream archaeology confirms that Mesopotamian burial practices varied by period, place, and status. Excavations at Ur, studied by the University of Pennsylvania and later scholars, revealed graves ranging from modest burials to royal tombs rich with goods and attendants. Researchers at Yale and Oxford have examined how funerary evidence and texts reveal beliefs about the dead, kinship, memory, and the fragile hope that care might continue beyond the grave. A body is buried, a relationship remains unsettled. You stand near a house where the dead are being prepared. The air smells of oil, wool, dust, and quiet tears. Someone washes the body. Someone brings a cloth. A child is kept near the doorway, old enough to sense fear, too young to understand the arrangements adults make with loss. The person who once spoke, ate, complained, worked, laughed, and slept has become still matter. The change is almost impossible to accept, though it has happened since the first human watched another stop breathing. Death is ordinary. It is never simple. In the Sumerian imagination, the underworld is not a paradise of shining fields. It is often described as a dark, dusty place, a house from which no one returns in the usual way. The dead require remembrance. The living must pour offerings, speak names, and maintain connection as best they can. Forgetting the dead is not merely emotional failure, it is spiritual neglect. This gives mortality a strange power, because humans die. Memory becomes urgent, because the body ends, names matter, because speech fades, writing matters, because households lose elders, stories matter. Death places pressure on every human act, asking it to become more than passing motion. A meal shared tonight becomes precious because no one can guarantee the same faces tomorrow. The gods, in many traditions, do not bear mortality in the human way. They may suffer, descend, rage, or disappear, but they belong to a different order of time. Humans do not. Humans feel time as hunger, aging, illness, desire, and the small panic of unfinished tasks. That vulnerability makes them weaker than gods. It also gives them fire. A quirky fringe tidbit appears in modern readings of ancient death texts, where some imagine the underworld as a literal hidden realm beneath ancient cities, reached through secret tunnels, caves, or forgotten chambers of priestly initiation. Archaeology does not support such dramatic maps as fact, though tombs, drains, and foundations certainly gave the earth below a powerful presence in daily life. The deeper truth is symbolic and intimate. The dead are beneath, behind, and within the living city. Every street walks above memory. The open scholarly debate concerns how ordinary Mesopotamians understood the afterlife emotionally. Some historians emphasize the bleakness of underworld descriptions. Others point to household offerings and ancestor care as signs of continuing relationship and ritual hope. Literary scholars study how death creates tension between heroic ambition and human limitation. The evidence refuses to become one simple doctrine, because grief itself rarely speaks in a single voice. You move through a burial courtyard at twilight. A small vessel is placed beside the dead. Perhaps it holds food, drink, or a symbolic provision for the journey no one can describe with certainty. A seal, bead, tool, or personal object may go with the body. Not always. Not for everyone. Poverty follows people even into burial, which is rude but historically persistent. Yet even a simple grave can hold tenderness. Someone cared enough to arrange the body. Someone remembered the name. The gods can decree fate, but humans answer death with gestures. They wash, wrap, bury, pour, name, sing, and return. These gestures do not defeat death. They shape the space around it. They say the person is not only gone, the person is mourned. That distinction may look small from heaven, but on earth it is immense. Mourning makes absence visible, and visible absence becomes a teacher. Mortality teaches humans to count not only grain, but days. It teaches them to notice the fragility of children, the slowing of parents, the danger of fever, the cost of war, the cruelty of famine, and the suddenness with which a familiar voice can become memory. It teaches urgency. It teaches tenderness. It teaches bitterness too, because grief is not always noble. Sometimes it is angry, petty, exhausted, and unfair. Ancient literature knows this. It knows that humans seek lasting names because bodies fail. It knows that rulers build monuments because bones do not hold authority for long. It knows that lovers cling because separation waits somewhere beyond the door. It knows that every feast contains the shadow of its ending. Every birth contains future mourning, and every city wall is already negotiating with time. This awareness makes humans unpredictable. A mortal being may obey out of fear, but may also risk everything because life is brief. A mortal being may serve the gods, but may also ask why service should consume the little time given. A mortal being may build a temple, raise a child, write a poem, hide a treasure, forgive an enemy, betray a friend, flee a city, or tell the truth at personal cost because the inner clock is always sounding. Death is the hidden drum. The gods may not control what people do when they hear it. You sit beside an old woman as she threads beads by lamplight. Her hands are slow, the knuckles swollen, the skin thin as dried parchment. She remembers floods, births, funerals, quarrels, harvests, hunger, and one song her mother sang while grinding grain. She does not own a palace, Her name may never enter a royal inscription, yet inside her is a library of lived time. When she dies, some of it vanishes. That thought is almost unbearable, so someone listens. A grandchild hears the song. A daughter remembers the recipe, the warning, the family story, the old insult still somehow active after 40 years. A neighbour recalls her kindness. A scribe may record none of this, and yet the transmission occurs. Human culture does not live only on tablets. It lives in gestures, habits, voices, and repeated care. Mortality forces transmission. It says, give this onward or lose it. Perhaps this is the ability the gods cannot fully command. The mortal urgency to make meaning before darkness closes. Immortals can wait. Humans cannot. That limitation sharpens perception. You notice the moon because nights are numbered. You love the child because childhood vanishes. You plant because hunger will come. You write because memory fails. You pray because fear has weight. You make meaning because you must. The night deepens over the city. The dying man's breathing slows, then steadies, then slows again. Someone beside him whispers a name. Outside, the stars spread cold and bright above the temple roof. The gods, if they are listening, hear the household hold itself together through one more fragile hour. No thunder answers, only breath, only the lamp, only the human refusal to let a life pass into nothing without witness. And in that refusal, mortality becomes more than weakness. It becomes the fire that drives memory, love, urgency, and defiance. The gods may possess endless time, but humans possess the knowledge of ending. That knowledge burns quietly, and because it burns, the human heart keeps creating light. The king cannot sleep because the wall he has built is not enough. You find him standing above the city in the cool edge of night, where the stones and bricks hold a fading warmth beneath his hand. Below, roofs lie close together like darkened steps toward the river. Lamps flicker in courtyards. Dogs bark once, then reconsider their contribution to history. Beyond the walls, the plain opens toward danger, distance, and the old silence of the earth. His name is Gilgamesh. He is king, warrior, builder, judge, tyrant, friend, mourner, wanderer, and question. In the great Mesopotamian epic, he begins as too much for his people, too strong, too restless, too certain that greatness excuses harm. The gods answer his excess by creating Enkidu, a wild man whose strength can meet his own. Their struggle becomes friendship, and friendship becomes the door through which mortality enters the king's heart. A mainstream historical fact stands behind the story's long life. Gilgamesh appears in the Sumerian king list as a ruler of Uruk, and later literary traditions turned him into the central figure of one of the ancient world's greatest epics. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied the epic through fragments found across Mesopotamia, showing how the tale developed over many centuries. A human king became literary memory, and literary memory became a mirror for fear. That mirror is dark. You walk through Uruk in imagination, where walls rise broad and impressive under starlight. The city smells of dust, cooling plaster, river mud, and the last smoke of evening meals. The wall is a real achievement, a line drawn between human order and the outside world. It protects houses, temples, markets, storerooms, children, and sleeping animals who have no appreciation for urban planning. Yet the wall cannot stop death. This is the terrible lesson Gilgamesh learns. Enkidu dies, and the king sees the fate waiting for him. Not as a distant idea, not as a priestly phrase. He sees it in the body of the one he loved, in the stillness where motion used to be, in the face that no longer answers. Grief strips the world of its comfortable lies. The king who could face monsters cannot face the simple fact that his friend is gone. He becomes afraid. That fear drives him beyond the city. He leaves behind palace, walls, ceremony, and praise. He crosses wilderness, mountains, darkness, and waters in search of Utnapishtim. The survivor granted a kind of immortality after the flood. Gilgamesh wants what no ordinary human can have. He wants to escape the law that binds flesh. He wants death to become a problem that courage, distance, and stubbornness can solve. It is a very human plan, also, frankly, a terrible one. A quirky fringe tidbit clings to Gilgamesh more than almost any other Mesopotamian figure. Some modern readers imagine that his search records a hidden journey to secret technologies of life extension, ancient genetic wisdom, or forbidden knowledge kept by survivors of an older world. Serious scholars do not treat those claims as evidence-based history. Yet the attraction is understandable, because the epic itself feels like a quest toward an ancient sealed truth. At its centre waits a question no age has outgrown. Can a human being defeat death? The scholarly debate remains rich and careful. Some researchers read the epic as royal wisdom literature, teaching kings to accept limits and rule well. Others emphasize grief, friendship, and the psychological shock of mortality. Literary scholars examine how the poem transforms heroic adventure into reflection, because the greatest monster Gilgamesh faces is not in the forest. It is the knowledge that he must die. You follow him through the night road. The air changes away from the city. It grows colder, scented with stone, thorn bushes, wild animals, and fear. The stars seem sharper beyond the lamps of Uruk. Gilgamesh wears skins. His hair becomes rough. The polished king becomes a haunted traveller. Every step away from civilization is also a step inward, toward the terror that no palace ceremony can soothe. This is not just adventure. It is descent through certainty. When he reaches Utnapishtim, he meets a survivor who knows what he does not. The answer is not triumph, but limitation. The flood survivor tells him of divine decisions, human fragility, and the rare exception that cannot become a general rule. Immortality is not a prize waiting for every determined king. It is a wound in the order of things, granted strangely, not earned by muscle or fame. Gilgamesh must learn what humans hate learning. Effort cannot conquer every boundary. The famous plant that may restore youth offers one more flicker of possibility. Gilgamesh finds it, and hope briefly returns. Then a serpent takes it while he bathes. The image is almost cruel in its simplicity. The king descends, suffers, reaches, obtains, relaxes for one human moment, and loses what he sought. The world does not even need a grand villain. A snake is enough. Existence can be rude like that. Yet this loss does not make the journey meaningless. That is the deeper wisdom of the epic. Gilgamesh fails to gain immortality, but he returns with changed sight. He sees the wall of Uruk, not as a denial of death, but as a human answer to it. The wall will not make him immortal. It will not preserve every name. It will not stop grief, but it represents work, city, memory, and shared life shaped against the pressure of ending. The wall becomes enough, not because it defeats death, but because it holds meaning. You stand beside him as dawn spreads over Uruk. Light touches the upper bricks, then the temple, then the roofs. The city stirs below. Bakers knead dough. Children wake reluctantly. Workers shoulder tools. Scribes prepare tablets. Women sweep thresholds. Someone complains about the quality of beer. Because civilization continues through both grandeur and criticism, Gilgamesh looks at the city differently now. Perhaps that is the uncontrollable human gift in its most painful form. Humans cannot live forever, but they can ask what forever means. They cannot escape death, but they can turn the knowledge of death into friendship, architecture, song, law, lament, and story. They can fail and still bring back understanding. They can lose the plant and still gain the poem. The gods may deny immortality. They cannot prevent the question. That question passes from Gilgamesh to the scribe, from the scribe to the tablet, from the tablet to readers under skies he never imagined. It moves through languages, ruins, libraries, classrooms, and quiet bedrooms where someone hears the old king's fear and recognizes it as their own. His failure becomes companionship. His grief becomes a lantern. No divine decree intended that, perhaps. Or perhaps the gods knew and feared it. A mortal creature who knows it will die becomes more than obedient clay. It becomes a seeker of meaning. It builds walls not merely for defense, but for memory. It loves friends with an intensity made sharper by loss. It looks at the stars and understands that beauty and terror can occupy the same sky. Gilgamesh returns without the thing he wanted. He returns with the thing he did not know he needed. Not immortality, but awareness. Not escape, but witness. The sun rises higher over Uruk. The wall glows with a warm, earthen colour. The river moves beyond it. Indifferent and generous. People step into the day, carrying tools, baskets, worries, jokes, and small hopes that do not seem heroic until you remember that all of them are temporary. The king has searched beyond the human boundary. He's found the boundary still standing, and because he cannot cross it, he begins to understand what it means to live within it. The fragments lie before you like broken pottery under a pale museum light. One piece carries the mark of a king, another holds a list of grain, another preserves a hymn to a goddess, another records a debt, ordinary and stubborn, because even 5,000 years ago someone owed someone barley. The pieces do not look like a single story at first. They look scattered, practical, sacred, domestic, and strange. Then the pattern begins to breathe. Across the Sumerian world, the gods establish order, assign roles, grant powers, receive offerings, and shape the boundaries of life. Humans appear beneath them, made from earth, bound to labour, tied to temple, field, market, and grave. It seems simple, almost too simple. Heaven commands. Earth obeys. The city functions. Smoke rises from the altar. Grain enters the storehouse. Names enter the tablet. But the texts keep refusing simplicity. Every system meant to contain humanity produces something more restless than planned. Labour produces skill. Skill produces judgment. Judgment produces comparison. Comparison produces doubt. Ritual produces song. Song produces grief. Writing produces memory. Memory produces questions. Death produces urgency. Urgency produces art, tenderness, ambition, and defiance. The hidden pattern is not a rebellion of weapons. It is a rebellion of imagination. Mainstream historians at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have long emphasized that Mesopotamian texts cannot be read only as myth or only as history. They are cultural records, preserving how ancient people thought about power, work, divine presence, society, and death. Archaeology gives walls, graves, tablets, tools, seals, and city plans. Literature gives the inner weather of the world that made them. Together, they reveal a human being who cannot remain only useful. That is the quiet truth. You sit in thought beside a shelf of tablets while dusk gathers outside the doorway. The clay surfaces are dry, cracked, and uneven. Some signs are clear, others are chipped away. A little dust rests in the wedge marks. Each tablet seems still, yet each contains motion. A voice begins when someone reads. A dead scribe's hand moves again through the eyes of the living. The gods may have possessed power. Humans learn to return. Return through ritual. Return through naming. Return through copying. Return through lament. Return through stories that carry the dead, the ruined, the frightened, and the ambitious back into the room. This ability to return in memory makes humans difficult to erase. A flood can kill. A conquest can burn. A king can boast. A god can withdraw. Yet a story may remain beneath the soil, waiting for another age to hear it. Imagination is not fantasy alone. It is the power to see what is absent. A worker imagines the canal before it is dug. A mourner imagines the dead as still deserving care. A scribe imagines a reader beyond the present room. A king imagines his name enduring after his bones are dust. A mother imagines a future for a child who cannot yet speak. A dreamer imagines a message inside the night. A poet imagines the city itself crying out. This is where humanity exceeds function. A tool performs its use and rests. A human performs a task and surrounds it with meaning. Digging becomes duty, punishment, pride or soste, or survival. Bread becomes offering, hunger, hospitality, or memory. A wall becomes defense, achievement, vanity, or the visible answer to fear. Even silence becomes full of possible meanings, which is very human and sometimes extremely inconvenient. The gods could demand bread. They could not fully determine what bread meant. A quirky fringe tidbit often circles the entire Sumerian tradition, claiming that the gods feared humans because humanity possessed a hidden divine spark, a lost power, or an inheritance from beings older than known civilization. These ideas usually wander far beyond solid evidence, sometimes with enormous confidence and very little luggage. Yet they echo something genuine in the texts. Humans are made low, but they keep reaching high. That reaching is the real mystery. The open scholarly debate is not about whether ancient people had imagination. Of course they did. The deeper debate concerns how to understand the relationship between myth and social reality. Some scholars see the texts as tools that reinforced hierarchy. Others notice places where myth reveals anxiety about that hierarchy. Some focus on religion, others focus on economy, language, politics, or literary play. Each approach catches one face of the same turning object. The tablets do not give one answer. They give pressure from above, where the gods hold destiny, pressure from below, where earth shapes bodies, pressure from the city, where labour and law organise lives, pressure from death, where every person ends. Under all this pressure, humans do not merely collapse. They form symbols. They make comparisons. They turn suffering into speech. That is why imagination cannot be dismissed as decoration. It is survival in symbolic form. You walk through the city one more time, not as a visitor searching for facts, but as someone listening for the pattern beneath the streets. At the temple, a priest lifts bread before a divine statue. In the market, a woman refuses a bad price with excellent calm. In the school, a child copies a line and secretly hates it. In the palace, a king hears praise and wonders how long it will last. In a house, a widow speaks a name into the dark. Each moment seems separate. Together, they form the human answer. The gods may organize the world from above, but humans create meaning from within. That inward creation is not always noble. Imagination can deceive, excuse cruelty, glorify power, and invent lies beautiful enough to march behind. The ancient texts know this too. Kings exaggerate, cities boast, people fear omens and misread signs. A story can heal, but it can also control. Still, even this danger proves the depth of the gift. Only a creature with imagination can misuse imagination. The ability the gods could not control is not simple freedom, because ancient humans were bound by hunger, rank, debt, law, family, flood, disease, and divine fear. It is not pure reason, because dreams, grief, and longing often speak more loudly than logic. It is not rebellion alone, because most people still worked, prayed, married, buried, traded, and obeyed. It is the capacity to make inner worlds. Those inner worlds touch the outer world slowly. A thought becomes a phrase becomes a proverb becomes guidance, a memory becomes a ritual becomes identity, a dream becomes a decision, a lament becomes history, a question becomes a crack in the wall of certainty. No empire can inspect every inner world. No temple can catalogue every private meaning. No god in the old stories, however luminous, can prevent clay from imagining the hand that shaped it. The room grows darker around the tablets. Outside, the last light leaves the river. A quiet smell of dust, old reeds, and cooling earth fills the air. You feel the ancient pieces settling into one deep arrangement. Not complete, never complete, but visible enough to haunt. Humans were made to serve, yet they learned to wonder. They were made of clay, yet they made clay remember. They were placed beneath the gods, yet they filled the space beneath heaven with stories heaven could not silence. And perhaps that is what the tablets still reveal. Not a weapon hidden in the human body, not a secret spell locked in a name, but the slow, ungovernable flame of imagination. It burns softly inside work. Grief, love, fear, and sleep. It turns command into question, loss into song, and mortality into meaning. The gods could shape the world, but humans could imagine another one. The last tablet rests beneath the earth, and no one has touched it for thousands of years. You imagine it lying in darkness under layers of dust, broken brick, ash, salt, root, and forgotten floor. Above it, centuries pass without ceremony. Rain comes and goes. Cities rise elsewhere. Languages shift. Empires sharpen their knives, carve borders, burn archives, praise themselves, and vanish with impressive confidence. The tablet waits through all of it, small and silent, as if patience were another kind of writing. No lamp reaches it. No priest reads it. No king knows it has survived. Yet the signs remain, pressed into clay by a hand whose warmth disappeared before history learned most of its later names. Perhaps the tablet holds a hymn, perhaps a school exercise, perhaps a list of sheep that once caused considerable concern to a tired accountant. Perhaps it holds a fragment of a myth, one more broken sentence about gods, humans, labour, floods, dreams, grief, and the dangerous motion of thought. That uncertainty is part of its power. The modern study of Sumerian texts is still unfinished, even after generations of excavation, copying, cataloguing, and translation. Tablets remain unpublished, damaged, misread, or waiting in collections. Scholars at major universities and museums continue to refine readings as signs are compared. Joins are discovered, and older assumptions are corrected. Ancient history is not a closed room. It is a dim room where the lamp keeps moving. That is a mainstream fact, and it is humbling. The past is not fully past if it can still surprise you. You stand in an archaeological trench at early morning. The air is cool for only a short while, and the horizon glows pale over the plain. Workers brush soil from a hard surface. A line appears, then a corner, then a tablet, cracked but present, emerges from the packed earth. No trumpet sounds, which is probably wise. The dead prefer less drama. Still, something changes in the silence. A human voice has returned, not loudly, not completely, only in fragments, a few signs, a phrase, a name, a number, a divine title, a line that may confirm a known version or disturb it with one small difference. But ancient history often turns on small differences. A variant word may reveal a local tradition. A damaged phrase may expose a forgotten ritual. A school tablet may preserve a joke, a proverb, or a teaching method that shows how minds were trained. The clay does not need to shout. It only needs to endure. You feel the irony now with greater softness. The gods in the old stories seek order, service, offerings, silence, and control. Kings seek fame, obedience, and lasting names. Temples seek continuity. Scribes seek accuracy, or at least they are supposed to, though some student tablets suggest the struggle was deeply human. Yet the thing that survives is not always what power intended. A humble exercise may outlast a royal palace. A broken myth may outlive the god's cult. A receipt may survive longer than the merchant's entire family line. Time is a strange editor. It keeps the footnotes. A quirky fringe tidbit often appears around unread tablets. Some modern imaginations picture sealed archives containing forbidden histories, lost technologies, or the final proof that ancient gods were something other than gods. Serious scholarship does not begin with such conclusions. It begins with clay, context, sign forms, language, comparison, and patient uncertainty. Yet the dream of the hidden tablet persists because it reflects a real emotional truth. Somewhere underground, something still waits to change the story. Perhaps not everything, but something. The open scholarly debate continues around many questions. How should creation stories be understood in relation to labour and hierarchy? How do flood traditions preserve memory, theology, and environmental fear? How much did scribal schools shape the literature that later generations treated as ancient inheritance? How did ordinary people understand gods whose statues lived in temples, yet whose presence filled rivers, storms, dreams, and household names? No single answer seals the archive. The archive breathes through questions. You return in thought to the sleeping tablet. Its clay once belonged to river mud. That mud belonged to a world of water, heat, reed, fish, and human need. Someone lifted it, cleaned it, shaped it, and held it steady while signs were pressed into the surface. The act was ordinary then, perhaps rushed, perhaps annoying, perhaps done under instruction by a student who would rather have been outside. Yet the result became a vessel of time. One hand pressed. Thousands of years listened. This is the final mystery, calm and unsettling at once. The ability that escaped divine control did not need to conquer heaven. It did not need to overthrow the gods or steal immortality. It only needed to continue forming meaning after every command had faded. Human imagination entered clay. Ritual, dream, market, lament, law, name, and story. It hid in repetition. It survived in fragments. It kept asking what the world meant, even when the world answered with flood, ruin, silence, or death. The gods could be worshipped. They could be feared. They could be remembered. But humans could remember them differently. That difference is everything. A god in a temple is one kind of presence. A god in a story is another. A god in a child's name, a widow's lament, a king's inscription, a scribe's exercise, or a dream at dawn becomes many presences at once. Each human receiver alters the divine through attention. Each act of memory is also an act of making, not creation from nothing, creation from meaning. You walk through a museum gallery at night, when the public has gone and the glass cases hold their quiet vigil. Tablets rest under soft lights, labels name cities, periods, languages, and collections. These objects look small against the spacious room, yet each one has crossed a gulf of time so wide that the mind struggles to measure it. The people who wrote them did not know this room would exist. They did not know you would lean close, trying to hear. And still, their signs wait for you. There is tenderness in that. The tablet does not explain everything. It does not solve the gods. It does not tell you exactly what the first Sumerian farmer feared at sunset, or what a young scribe thought when his teacher corrected the same sign for the 5th time. It does not restore lost voices entire. It gives fragments, and fragments ask for imagination. That is fitting. The story began with clay shaped into bodies, cities, tablets, and offerings. It ends with clay asking the living to complete what cannot be fully recovered. You become part of the process. You listen. You picture the heat, the reeds, the temple shadow, the market dust, the sleeping house, the flooded plain, the ruined city, the king at the wall, the scribe at his bench. The ancient world stirs because your mind makes room for it. The gods could not control that room. No ruler can build walls around it. No flood can drown it completely. The last tablet still sleeping beneath the earth is not only an artifact, It is a promise that the past remains unfinished and that human meaning continues to emerge from darkness. One day, perhaps, another fragment will rise. A brush will clear its surface. A scholar will lean closer. A sign will be read. A forgotten sentence will breathe again. And perhaps the sentence will not answer the mystery. Perhaps it will deepen it. Perhaps that is enough. The night around you grows gentler now. The desert wind softens over the ancient plain, lifting dust without hurry, carrying it across low mounds where houses, shrines, courts, and schoolrooms once stood. The rivers continue somewhere in the darkness, changed in their courses, yet still moving with the old patience of water. Above them, the stars remain distant and cold, not cruel, only vast. You do not need to solve the tablets tonight. You can let them rest. Let the gods return to their high, shadowed chambers. Let the kings stand quietly in their broken inscriptions. Let the scribes lower their reed styluses and close their tired eyes. Let the markets fade, the canals darken, the lamps shrink to small gold beads in the sleeping city. Let the old arguments soften into murmurs, and the old griefs settle like dust after wind. You are only listening now. The clay has spoken enough for one night. In the hush, you may feel how small and precious the human gift truly is. Not loud power, not endless life, not control over storm, river, death, or time. Only the soft, stubborn ability to imagine meaning where silence seems complete. Only the wish to remember, to name, to love, to question, and to carry a fragile light from one mind to another. That light does not need to blaze. It may glow like a lamp in a reed-walled room, steady beside a cooling tablet. It may flicker in a dream, or in the breath before a name is spoken. It may rest in you now, gentle and uncommanded, as night gathers around the edges of thought. So let the ancient city grow quiet. Let the river move under the moon. Let the buried tablet sleep beneath its blanket of earth. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the reach of kings and gods, the story is not yet complete. End of script. Good night.